Hey, how are you doing? This is your host, Richard Sachs from Lost Arts Radio. This is our Saturday discussion show. Call in. We take some calls near the end. If you want to be part of the show, you can do that at 657-383-1002. It'd be fun to hear from you if you'd like to join us. And in the meantime, I usually go over a few things first, and then we'll take a few calls at the very end and see how it just unrolls that way. I just want to let you know that for new listeners, and I know there are some of you tuned in, and this is called Church of the Essene Teacher. I wrote the description that you see on Blog Talk a few months ago when we were starting, and I guess I should update it because it's been kind of evolving into a more developed format. But really what it's about, in case you're wondering it's not a religious show. It's not a regular church that you could go to. You still have to go to your regular church. If you have a church that you go to or any other religion that you're attached to, that's fine. It's not to change any of that stuff, and it's not to even change any of your beliefs or philosophies or anything. It's just an environment of open investigation and learning of some of the finer things that are going on around us that we might not, be totally in touch with all the time, so that you get reminded, and hopefully it's useful for you in your life. And the Essene Teacher that's referred to is the one in the Essene Gospel of Peace, which is a very short little written document that you can find on the website of lostartsradio.com. I think Doug has it up there as an audiobook and also as a link to a PDF, although you can even put in Essene Gospel of Peace Book 1 into any good search engine. I like to use DuckDuckGo. It has a weird name, but it doesn't spy on you. Start Page is okay too, but DuckDuckGo is a little more private. You put it in there, Essene Gospel of Peace Book 1 PDF, and that means you can just read it there without buying it or anything. It doesn't cost any money. And see if you relate to anything in there. For me, I first ran into it in 1975, about 10 years into my health research work, and it really resonated with old memories that I still have and have actually gotten more clear since that time. But I was also already involved in detoxification and fasting and seeing what could be done normally with live food diets and grounding and sunlight and exercise and sleep and redirection of mental and emotional programs and stuff that is designed to allow you to have your normal health. And when I ran into that book, I remembered how it was done a long time ago. And I mean, in the bigger picture, a couple thousand years is nothing. It was not that long, but compared to usually thinking in terms of minutes and weeks, it was a while. So I'm trying to bring back some of what was known and taught in that time to share with you. And it's in honor of that teacher, but as in my memory and what was gone over in that book, it wasn't about religion. He wasn't teaching anything about religion. There was no Christianity at that time. The Judaism, some of it was practiced in a really positive way. Others was practiced in a way that was very vicious. And it just all came down to depending on how the individual saw it. And even if you look at the Essenes of that period, there was a vast array of different interpretations of the lifestyle that they lived. So they weren't all this monolithic culture or anything. There were some that ate only raw meat because they felt like it made them much more warlike, and they could go and defend God and peace and love by murdering everybody that was in disagreement with them. For God, like many religions, have gone through phases like that. And then there were others that were receptive to different degrees to what they were being taught by the teacher in the Essene Gospel of Peace, who was about fasting and raw living food, not eating any meat at all, but using a little raw milk. And because in my experience, it works much better than just raw vegan diets in the long run. Although for detox, you wouldn't do it then, but later on. And so some of them were receptive to what he was talking about, and the physical part was only to make you more easily receptive to the real work, which is all internal. And it's not about it's not, well, it's all connected, of course. I was about to say it's not about physical healing, but in reality, they go together, because the more you tune into that life energy on a spiritual level, the more your physical body benefits, and you get over little problems like aging and degenerative diseases, and you start getting very much naturally immune to infectious diseases, so you don't worry about microorganisms anymore. You know, it has a lot of little benefits like that, and he was showing people how to do that because it's very practical. It's not based on some kind of magic herb, or certainly not on drugs or anything like that, but it's just based on understanding and using and harmonizing with the life force. And that's the basis of healing, and it still is. And it's also the basis of knowledge. It's not something that you read in a book or memorize, although those may help you. And the Essene Gospel of Peace is a book, and there's a lot of other great books and scriptures of different kinds and things that are good. But what they all say, if they're true, is to read it inside. And so in the beginning, that seems to make no sense, but eventually it really makes sense. So anyway, the show is not about that teacher or about the book or any of the things really described in there, the scenes, you know, that were happening thousands of years ago. It's certainly not about me. I'm a low-level beginner in all this stuff. I'm really not the best person to be talking about it because I'm still working through the beginning levels, like, you know, doing it right alongside with many of you. I've learned what I've learned by apparently making as many mistakes in my own life as possible for as long as I could. And eventually, you know, amazingly, I'm still here and figured out a few things. And I figured that's my responsibility to share what I can with you. So maybe you don't have to make all of the same mistakes that I did, which would be better. But actually, it's not about me or the Essene Gospel of Peace or anything. It's actually about you. And because it's not supposed to be just momentary entertainment, really. It's supposed to be something that you can use of value to you. And if I just tell you the regular stuff that you hear everywhere else, you could probably use your time better doing something else. So if I just tell you how bad things are in the world, or which is true, and you need to know about that, but there's really good places to learn about that now. There are hundreds of shows talking about the corruption in government and the healthcare system and all the religions and all these different places. But that really doesn't leave you anywhere except thinking everything's really bad. And what's required is things you can use for solutions. So, you know, I thought, well, what can I share with you tonight? Because I don't prepare these shows in detail. They're not scripted or anything like that. Nobody writes anything for me, but I have to think about before each one, what kind of value can I actually give you if you're willing to spend a little bit of your super valuable time listening? Because there's thousands of shows on the air now. A lot of them are great, and several we recommend. And I thought, well, what if this was the last show we were able to do? And the world is so unstable, it could be. You never know. I mean, it's always a big shock when that happens, but it could happen any time, and it doesn't matter. But before it does, while we're still here, it would be really good to make good use of our time, it seems to me. So I don't want to just do an entertainment show. I want to do something that you can use. And I thought, well, you know, this was about physical healing because people need to understand that what's being taught in the healthcare system and the medical industry is mostly false. And it doesn't mean the doctors are all bad people at all. A lot of them are good friends of mine, and there are some wonderful people in the healthcare industry, not just doctors, but some fantastic nurses and other healthcare industry people who have been on the show as guests, actually. A lot of incredible people who I have learned a lot from. But at the top, it's engineered to cause sickness and death and disease and destruction and, you know, the usual stuff that the top-level global rulers are into. And it's very successful. The medical industry kills about Probably more than 1 million Americans a year, and it does a lot more around the world. But again, knowing that leaves you where? Not in a very good place unless you have an alternative. So in the Essene Gospel, it talks about laws of nature, they're not like laws that somebody punishes you for breaking, this nasty cosmic policeman or something like that. It's more like design principles. They had to be used in order to make this place work and design this whole amazingly intricate setup around a concept of duality or whatever. It doesn't matter what you call it. It matters what it actually is. And so those laws are operational in keeping everything going. And that's good, because if you learn how to harmonize with them and learn what they are, you don't really have health issues anymore, except what you've done, too much damage to completely fix, or what the environment has damaged you too much with. But even then, it gets so much better in almost every case that it's highly worthwhile. So I thought, all right, where could you start? What's the basis of all those natural laws? And you could look at it a lot of different ways if you want to use them in your life, which is the whole point. And it really starts, you can't avoid beginning with an awareness of who you actually are. This is all tied together. You can't separate you can't separate out physical and mental and emotional and spiritual levels of things. That's a human distinction in intellect, trying to say, well, these are different departments and categories of life. But that's just artificial. The reason it's pushed in higher education is so that you won't be able to understand anything, and it's quite effective, because what it makes is super brilliant scientists who are so specialized, and not just physical scientists or chemical scientists or medical scientists, but psychological scientists and all kinds of other ones that are so specialized and so brilliant in such a narrow field that they have no idea of the context. And they're perfect for the higher up rulers to use them as tools to help with the destruction of the world, which is what most of them end up doing. That's where most of the good jobs are financially, actually, is working on some big destructive project. And then, finding out why it's not destructive and it's all great, and you get all of these rewards for going along with the mentality, and pretty soon you're not able to see at all what you're doing. But if you start with looking at who you are, which is not something that you normally can just become aware of instantly, it's a long commitment. If you realize it's important to understand that, not memorize some answer, that means nothing. I'm talking about experiencing it. Because at a deeper level, when you experience more and more, then some of your old normal abilities and characteristics start coming back automatically. And that's worthwhile. And part of my ulterior motive for wanting you to reconnect to that is that I'd really like to see the world not be destroyed. And I consider you personally to be the main hope for it. So if you start at the very, very beginning, and I'll explain that too, because, one person, what's that? But that's a lot. There's something hidden there. So if somebody asked you who you are right now, what would you answer? Your name, how old you are, what political party you belong to, what religion you are, and how many years of school you had, or if you're married, or how many kids you have. What would you say? And how does that answer the question? So, this is long. We could do years of shows on that question. But to make an answer that makes any sense, you actually have to have an experiential feel of what your answer is. So you look at your body. You're male or female, and a certain age, maybe a certain height, you weigh a certain amount. But wait a minute, that's not you. if it gets damaged, even if you lose part of it, you're still 100% there. So it's a vehicle, and this is not just from me. All kinds of people have figured this out throughout history. This is not irrelevant questions. This is not useless stuff. So you have to be a little patient, and you'll see where I'm going with it. So what about your mind? Your mind is that faculty that thinks it's not your brain. Your brain is like a switching station that chemically and biologically, with all these complex reactions, most of which science has no clue that they even exist. It's very arrogant and proud. But science in its current form knows practically nothing about what's actually going on. They would disagree, of course, but that's my impression. You can see what you think. But your mind is something that outlives the brain. And I know that experientially. And so do a lot of other people. And some of them have said it. So your mind plays programs. It's an amazing device. It's not physical. Your brain is the physical tool that the mind uses, but the mind itself is the non-physical tool that we use to relate to the physical world. That means existence in a three-dimensional reality at a certain frequency. All the electrons going around atoms at about 9/10 the speed of light, and all these things vibrating and spinning in certain directions. It looks solid, but it's not solid. I don't know if you remember the model of the atom that you got in elementary school. I don't know if they're still doing that later, but a long time ago when I was in elementary school in early 50s, they gave us this little tinker toy model of the atom with colored balls made out of wood, green, and I remember green ones and red ones and yellow and blue. And there were little sticks. You know what tinker toys are, right? I mean, I know they're not popular in the latest digital, world where you buy your kid a screen of some kind. But we used to have toys like tinker toys, pieces of wood with holes in them, that you made models and things out of. It was actually fun, and it didn't destroy your brain or anything. And anyway, in elementary school, they had these tinker toy models of the atom, and they had these spheres about maybe, 3 inches in diameter with holes in them for the sticks that would hold them together to make kind of a circular atom model with some balls in the middle that were the nucleus. Those are the protons and neutrons, supposedly. And the problem with that was that the scale is off. That's not really the scale of an atom, even if you use the atom model of matter. So if you want to know the right scale that's more accurate, and you go to a big room like the Sistine Chapel, I think that might be in Naples, Florence or Naples in Italy, and I should know that, but that's the place where Michelangelo did his painting on the ceiling. It's a really big room, and you hang a thread from the middle of his painting halfway down to the floor, and you put a grain of rice on the end of it, and that would represent the nucleus of the atom. And then you have a few grains of dust flying around the outside of the room really fast. Those would be the electrons, and the rest is all empty space. So if you look at that scale, what is an atom? Well, it's almost all space. And even when they got more fine equipment and they started looking at electrons appearing and disappearing, they didn't even know where they were going. They seemed to go out of physical existence and come back again, which is a certain probability of being in different places at different times. You see that almost everything here on the so-called solid physical world is empty space. The mind is tuned to that frequency, and it makes sense of it, operates through the brain and our senses, and it makes it all look solid so we can interact with it and have the experiences that we came here for. And there's long, long history, thousands and thousands of years, of people wanting to know who they were. The vast majority of the population may have just memorized an answer in their belief system or their philosophy or their religion going back a long time. But some people said, wait a minute, how do I know that's true? I want to experience it. I want to really experience it face to face. And so the old yogis, for example, in the Himalayas in India, identified mind as the enemy that was keeping them from knowing who they were, because they realized that the mind was playing all of these programs like we've been talking about. And they could be good or bad, but they were total distraction from whatever was real behind the programs. And some people, of course, thought there was nothing behind the programs. They were the programs, but other ones found out that's not. So the yogis, most of them, tried to fight the mind and saw it as the enemy. And they did amazingly severe and ascetic type practices of different kinds. They, not just the yogis, I mean, in all religions, and the old Christians and many of the people did terrible things to their bodies, supposedly to conquer the mind so that it wouldn't distract them with anger and fear and frustrated desires of all kinds and things like that. All of them who did that failed. And the reason they failed is really not that complicated. It's because if you want to fight the mind, which you see as the programs, you use the mind to fight the mind, and that does not work. All you get is a really frustrated, upset mind, and in the end, it wins. And so some people would blame it on some evil spirit or devil, but and those things are real. I mean, I know that from experience. There are all kinds of dark beings, I mean, lots and lots of different kinds, that exist on non-physical levels of existence. But what are they going to do to you if you don't listen to them? It's like if some friend comes over and convinces you to rob a bank with them, you can't totally blame the friend because you agreed to do it. And we have free will. So no matter who it is, whether it's your friend next door or some high-level demonic creature, it's really up to us. And we don't have to agree to anything unless we want to. So, as I was saying, it's mind that records these programs that we give it, which are our beliefs and what we believe to be true, and beliefs about ourselves are some of the most powerful. And then it's the mind that, after recording the program, it listens. And you just can't blame anybody for that if you want to get anywhere with it. Blaming is a way to avoid doing what you need to do. So the yogis tried to fight the mind. They all failed. After temporarily succeeding, they got certain supposedly miraculous powers. Some of them could manifest, jewels falling out of the sky and little things like that, which really don't mean anything. Mind is very powerful. It can do all kinds of stuff. But in the end, they failed, and all the things that they were trying to escape from, they got totally lost in. But there's a different way. They didn't all fail. Because there were some that realized that the mind can be an ally. And if you do that, the whole game changes. All the rules are different. And I know that, everybody thought we were going to be talking about live food and fasting and why raw food is good, and juicing, and how to get enough sleep, and what kind of exercise you need. We will get to that. I'm just saying that what I started noticing shortly after doing this show, because people wanted to use those things to get over all their diseases, and of course I would have to say, as I do now, we don't give medical advice. I'm sorry to frustrate all the government monitors listening to us right now, but we're not going to diagnose or cure anything or do anything medical. If you want drugs, you need organs removed or parts of your body cut off or radiation or chemotherapy, please go to your doctor, and I'm sure they'll be glad to do that for you right away. So all we're doing is nothing to do with that stuff at all. Even if I had the appropriate medical doctor license, which I don't, I wouldn't be interested in any of that, because that's so far opposite to the way the real laws of nature work. It's just it's worse than a dead end. It's an end of prolonged suffering, which almost everybody's falling for, because you see this authority figure wearing a white coat, maybe a stethoscope, and has trained for many years of how to seem condescending and arrogant and really drum up fear in the patients. I mean, it's really I'm very averse to that stuff because it's not what you need and what we need in order to be healthy. So the reason we get into all this stuff is because if I just list what to do in harmony with natural laws, most people run into a problem in trying to do it because there are psychological blocks and there are programs and there are addictions. You don't have to be a heroin addict to have addictions. Virtually everybody has them. But anyway, what I found out is if you could identify where the blocks are coming from and get rid of those, then you can do whatever you want with your physical body. And you don't need willpower. You don't need any of that kind of stuff because you've removed the things that make it difficult. So that's why we're talking about things that might seem irrelevant, but in my experience, they're not irrelevant. So I hope you can relate to some of this stuff. So I'll try to go as quickly as I can. Making the mind an ally. Mind is super powerful. It's dominated our whole lives, and it's doing it now. It contains all our beliefs, and what's more important, it contains all the fear. And fear is what's behind anger, frustration, all these other things. There's fear hidden there. And if you can drop the fear, that's an accomplishment that people have tried back since before recorded history to do, and you can do it. But you can't do it by force. You can't do it by fighting the mind or trying to just do it by willpower. It just totally does not work because you're trying to defeat the mind with the mind, different departments against each other. It's not going to work. So to make the mind an ally, you have to realize what it is. And this gets really challenging to put into words. And I'm sorry if I'm not doing a good job. I'm sure that's the case. But I have to try because I want you to have it. And one of the basic principles of how this place was made, everything was created out of consciousness. Because in the beginning, there wasn't any matter. There wasn't any energy. There wasn't mind. There wasn't any of that stuff. And there was no Home Depot to go get lumber to put it together. So everything that was made, what the quantum physicists are beginning to realize is a holographic projection of consciousness, was made out of consciousness, even what appears solid. So you look at what mind is, and if you start to get the idea, then your guess is, oh, mind is conscious. Correct. So mind is not a thing. It's self-aware and conscious, just like you are. And it doesn't appreciate being thought of as a thing. And it's going to keep making life miserable as long as we don't see it for what it is. And it's very powerful. It's like a 2-year-old kid with nuclear and chemical weapons. You don't want to try to jump on the kid and have a wrestling match. It's not a good idea. And this particular kid is very, very strong. But it is the kid, and you're the parent. And that's your way through. So you don't use intimidation, you don't use fear, you don't use force. You use love, respect, and an offer that is sincere. I know this is going to sound totally crazy to maybe most of you. I really apologize. This is for those of you who might be able to relate to what I'm saying. Even if I lose a lot of people, I have to say this for those who might catch it. Because this is a big deal. It's something that is written about in very ancient accounts from many, many thousands of years ago. People have been working on this for a long time. And you can do it now. So the mind is conscious, it's self-aware. If you treat it as a small child, like suppose you had a 2-year-old kid to take care of, okay, and you love the child, and the child is having a tantrum, you don't get a stick and try to hit the child, right? That's what the old yogis were trying to do with their ascetics practices. It doesn't work because this child is strong. In its own realm, it's the one designed by consciousness to deal with the entire physical level of existence. It's not a minor entity, but it is like a 2-year-old child. So if you approach it that way and let it know when you can actually focus on it and recognize its existence, you say, wow, that was very impressive, mind. I mean, yes, you got my attention. You run all these terrible programs. You convinced me to be afraid of everything. And what Charles Schultz and Peanuts said, panophobia, you've made me hate everybody and start all these fights. Boy, that was incredible accomplishment for one mind, you. And I understand you've been doing that for a long, long time to get my attention and to be appreciated. And I'm sorry it took me so long. This is not a script. This is just an example. So I thank you for being here. And now, because you have such great abilities and are such a great being, I'm going to give you a chance to do some things with me. And the mind's going to get all excited because a 2-year-old kid loves to be recognized by the parent. And you can think of whatever you really would like it to help you with. I started out just saying, well, boy, I'm terrible remembering people's names. Mind has files on absolutely everything. Whoop, I don't know what happened there. I think the sound went off for a minute. Mind has complete files on absolutely everything, so it knows everyone's name. Not only the people you know, it knows everybody else. So mind gets all excited, and it started helping me remember names, and I never forgot anybody's name after that. But then I started thinking, what else can you do? And, obviously I started out without much imagination, but then I started realizing this is a major being that has amazing abilities, and they could be used for a lot of good. And that's open-ended, and we'll get into more of what it can do as we talk. But whatever you can imagine, there's more than that it can do. So in order to even be aware of the mind and its programs, you've got to get very quiet, and you have to listen. And you have to start hearing what thoughts are playing in your mind. And you need to know the intellectual level thoughts, and you need to feel the emotions, and you need to get over the idea that those are you. I'm sorry if this sounds insane. If you want a normal program, you've got 1,000 other radio programs to listen to. I have to tell you, what I've run across, because I don't think you're going to hear it everywhere. And if you want a normal show, please, any other show is going to be normal compared to this one. So anyway, to do this, you have to get really quiet in yourself, and you have to start listening to the thought patterns, realizing they're not you. And they could be anything. They could be beautiful. They could be horrible. They could be violent. They could be anything. There's no limit on what kind of thought. All the thoughts are at the disposal of the mind. And any of those could be playing. So you have to become aware of them. And that's the easier part. Then the more subtle part is you have to start becoming aware of the emotional patterns which play simultaneous with the mind, with the thoughts. And they're hard to put in words because they'll have kind of a feeling or a flavor to them. Emotions don't fit neatly into words. That's why there's poets trying to do that kind of thing. But you need to feel them and observe them going by and realize those are not you. Those are whatever you've programmed your mind to play. Okay, once you've become aware of that, then you get quieter and you say you notice one level of thought playing. Mr. Jones should have cut his lawn, or he's a terrible person, or I wish I had as much money as Mrs. Smith, or her makeup looks much better than mine, those are not a really good use of time. It's just what we're used to. But you become aware of those. You don't try to stop those thoughts by force. And you get more and more relaxed. And you scan. You have to be relaxed to do this. You cannot do it if you're tense. And everybody's got multiple layers of tension in the way. So one of the things you have to do while you're learning this stuff is you have to scan your body, because your body's connected to your consciousness. And you find places in your body that are holding tension like a knot. And you go right in there with your attention and you give it permission to relax. And if you mean it, not in a forceful way, but completely confident and relaxed in the fact that you are the authority in your own body, it has to relax. I know this sounds ridiculous, but it's true. So if you do that, even if you, I'll tell you as an example, even if you go to a fantastic masseuse or masseur, who are really valuable at times, and then you don't change the thought pattern and the emotional pattern that's holding that tension in that spot in the body, it's going to come back. So I'm telling you about getting to the cause, and since you're the one in your body that has the authority, you can tell it that it can relax now, and it will. And the more you do that, you keep hearing deeper and deeper layers of thought and emotion, and having to remember none of them are you. And we're still in the process of answering the question of who you are, which is a prerequisite to really getting anywhere with any of this stuff. And it's not like you find out who you are and that's the end of it. There are levels and levels, and you keep getting to new ones. And they're not contained in anything you can memorize. You got to go there and experience it. This is what people in the 60s and afterwards even tried to do with LSD and other drugs. And sometimes they really got visions of things that were way beyond what they could have reached. But drugs are really dangerous because they change the chemistry of the mind, even so-called natural ones. So even though they can be wonderful at times, you've got to go back and deal with the cause. The drug by itself is not enough. And there have been some wonderful results from these natural drugs from plants that they use, ayahuasca and iboga and other stuff like that people have gotten over addictions overnight. But if they don't go back eventually and deal with where it came from, they can even have a relapse, and there can be instability that comes because the drug can rip open perceptions that you may not be ready for. So it's more work, but it's better if you can do it without the drugs. And I'm giving you one idea how you can do that. So you begin a relationship with your mind once you realize the big deal that it's not you. And you do it out of love, and you see it as a magical type of child. And when I use the word magic, I'm not talking about some kind of scary black magic or some evil thing that people who are scared of everything unknown try to make you think it is. I'm talking about something incredible beyond your current level of experience. And you respect it for its amazing abilities. And so you praise it. Genuine praise. Wow, you're incredible. You really do have the ability to deal with the physical world. So now let's think how you could use your special abilities. It makes me remember, I haven't watched movies for many years because I really don't have time for it, and a lot of them are so full of programming I don't want. But a long time ago, I used to watch a lot of movies, and there was one called Twilight Zone, the movie. Did you guys see that? You can probably rent it for $3, if not less. And it's got one of the episodes. They had a whole bunch of different sequential episodes, little stories in that were really good, I thought. And one of them was with this little kid named Anthony, representing, I'm saying, similar to what I'm saying is the mind. And Anthony had this power that whatever he imagined happened. So he lived in this old rundown mansion, this mysterious house with his family, who lived in complete fear that if they displeased him, he would do some terrible thing to them by thinking, some bad thing for them, which he actually did. But then his elementary school teacher came over maybe to find out why he wasn't in school or something. And she recognized his ability, and she wasn't into fear. She was incredibly brave, just like you are. You may just not know it. And she convinced him out of love and out of enticement with an offer, come with me and I'll show you how to use your ability to regenerate and heal the world. This is exactly what I'm talking about. And so the last scene in that episode was he went along with her and he got in the car and they drove off. And you didn't know what was going to happen, but you got a clue because in the back of the car they were driving across a desert like lower Arizona or somewhere like that. And all these flowers were coming up behind the car. So that's nothing compared to what you can do. And this is why, I would say, let it know how much you appreciate it. That's how she made friends with Anthony. And you might want to look at that episode to see what I'm talking about. It's kind of fun to watch. All of the mind's bad behavior has been to get your attention and love by making a huge mess, and then that would create a continuing need for it to be solved, which of course it would never be solved, and that would give it a sense of appreciation and importance. And that's not as good as what it would get and how it would feel if you recognize it and make it an ally. You are never supposed to understand this, according to our world leaders. They want you to fight about somebody's race, or who has the best or the worst religion, or some stupid thing, who has too much money. This is the stuff that you're not supposed to ever calm down long enough to ever look at. So when the mind makes a mess and you never give it any attention, the parent becomes the captive, even though as the parent in this situation, you are the holder of consciousness that includes all the lower levels, including mind, and you can do what you want. So the fighting is useless for reasons that we already went over. And the mind is our tool to deal with the physical plane, but it's conscious and self-aware, so you don't fight it. If you try to do it by force, it does obey, but it gets resentful and things get a lot worse. So praise it, give it love, practice, awaken the tool of proactive love in general, because what I'm suggesting to use with the mind, you can use with yourself, other people, other situations, maybe the whole world, without saying anything. It's not the kind of love that you're enamored of somebody and then they do something that you don't like and you hate them after that. It's not even close to that. It's a gift that you've got that just by deciding you can give to anybody. And the people that are most difficult for you to deal with are the ones that need it the most. And if you do it with them, you can do it with your mind. And then you start a positive cycle, like a snowball effect. So you're offering your mind a promotion to join you and help you in special ways that you're going to really appreciate. And you just experiment with different things. And what it can do is amazing, and it can affect other people just like it's been starting fights and causing resentment and setting up these horrible situations. It can also do the opposite. It can harmonize things. That's just the tiniest hint of where its power goes. And it's related to, I don't know, I told you on the site there's the Essene Gospel of Peace Book 1, but on LostArtsRadio.com there's also another book called The Emerald Tablets, which I found really interesting and useful, by a guy named Thoth, very unusual character, who actually shows up in Egyptian hieroglyphics, originated in his present form in Atlantis a long, long time ago, and has been showing up in current society, up at least until a few years ago that I know of. Not the typical lifespan of a person that you would expect. And one of the things in the Emerald Tablets, you'll see it if you read it, and it's a small, easy book to read, but it's very deep. he had a form of martial arts that I thought was great. So I spent a long time in martial arts, probably 40 years playing with it in different forms. And then finally I decided I wanted to do things a different way, because it didn't really harmonize with the other efforts that I was making in my own education and internal exploration. If you do martial arts long enough, you just get totally focused on methodically destroying, or how you would destroy people, and that's not really helpful in the mentality that you need to get your mind to adopt. So there was a story in the Emerald Tablets about Thoth going to Khem, Khem. That was the country that later became Egypt. This was quite a while ago, before there were pyramids or pharaohs or anything like that. There were just people living in caves, and they weren't friendly. They were very fearful, which is where violence comes out of. And so when Thoth and his friends showed up there, they came out of their caves with spears and clubs, and they were going to kill them all, as, just for good measure, to make sure everything stayed safe. And so Thoth did not spin around like Yoda, cutting him up with a lightsaber, or, do death blows in martial arts or anything. He just used frequency to just stop them. It's like they froze, not cold, but they just stopped where they were. And they were still conscious, but they couldn't move. And he just explained to them very nicely that they were not there to hurt them. They were there to help create a new civilization, which they did. And when he let them go, then their attitude was different, and they were not aggressive. And I think this ability comes by a very advanced being, which could be you, using the mind. Because remember, we've had a lot of people on about Wi-Fi and the damage that cell towers are doing, and that kind of thing. And we got around to the point that each one of us is a positive cell tower, so to speak, but much more potentially powerful than the nasty cell towers that are being set up all over the world right now, especially with the 5G, but even the 4G ones that are these giant towers all over the place. The microwave radiation that comes out of them is very destructive, and you're not supposed to know about that either, but there are some people who have found out and trying to get it stopped, and I don't think they're stopping it as of yet, but that's what they're attempting to do. And my point was that we are a very powerful cell tower in a positive way, and mind includes the technology to generate frequencies of all kinds. So it can generate negative frequencies that are mostly all based on fear, and they come out through different kinds of destructive energy. But it can also put out positive healing type energy, including the one that Thoth was using to avoid having to fight with those people who were coming to kill them, but also in a healing way. And it can either be done from yourself, like, there's energy healers that, not the ones that are fraudulent, but there's a few real ones, and they can touch you or look at you or talk to you and give you a boost in energy. But if they're operating from themselves, from the personality level, you know that because they get exhausted when they do that. It's real, but it's limited. The ones who are a little bit more aware on a deeper level, they get energized as they do it because the energy just flows through them. So they're using their receiving ability and their transmitting ability both at once. And actually, we're all using that, but in a very sloppy, unconscious manner. And if you make it conscious, which is one of the results that happens when you start to become aware of your programming, then there's almost no limit to what we can do with that. And I mean, you can join me. I'm experimenting with it all the time now. And you have to be very, very still and very aware. And then you have to receive what you want to transmit. And fortunately, as we have also talked about before, every potential program that you might want to receive of healing or anything like that, that you want to transmit to other people or the whole world or whatever, it's always available. And so it's like radio programs that are broadcasting through the room that you're sitting in. They're all playing, the bad ones and the good ones, and the good music and the bad music and the commentary and all that stuff. Well, anything that you can imagine and more has a corresponding frequency of energy, and it's all available. So if you learn to tune to that, to the one you want, then you can project it. And if we change the perspective like that and start to look at these things as not us, but to use them and relate to them with respect, then healing the body is really easy. And you just learn how the laws of nature work. You do them. You don't need any willpower. You don't have any psychological blocks, because they disappear in the process of what we've been talking about. So if you want to heal the body as much as you can, you take the same approach, and you realize the body's not a pile of atoms that just happen to line up so they work. The body's made of consciousness, and it's manifesting as a physical entity, but it is self-aware. It's very complicated because every organ is self-aware. Every cell is self-aware, which you can see if you observe through a microscope. They do all the things, all the activities of an independent life form. Every cell does. And actually every atom does, and subatomic particles do. And it's so far beyond what science is aware of. It's not even close. But you don't have to understand all the complexity, which is you could never do anyway, if you tune into it on the level of its awareness. So if you relate to your body just like we talked about relating to your mind, that it's a self-aware entity, and it appreciates it. It's been wanting your attention and your respect and love and care as long as it's existed, and it never got it in most cases. And it's got incredible tenacity, so it waits a long time, but eventually, between us ignoring it or treating it like a hunk of meat or something that's not aware, and feeding it garbage and not giving it the sunlight it needs or the sleep it needs or other things, eventually it breaks down. You don't have to understand and memorize 1,000 chemical reactions. Those are not your department. The life force that is keeping the body alive knows every one of those chemical reactions in complete detail and harmonizes them completely. And those chemical reactions that we consider the whole picture, they're the most superficial layer. There's a vast depth of it in how the body functions beyond that. There is no way that science will ever figure out the complexities of the body. And that's why they come up with these remedies that destroy everything. And, it's a big mess. But as a conscious individual, you have the ability to do it the other way. So the body's self-aware, so is every part, but the body as a whole is. And it tries to communicate. It has been trying to communicate with its owner, which is you, as long as you've had it and before. And when it was developing in the womb, the communication was there. It was completely alive. So if you decide you ever want to do that, and you give it any attention, it's going to be overjoyed, and it's going to respond. And if you learn its language, which is not in English words, it's in feeling, and it's very subtle, it will tell you everything it needs. But we've degraded it and ruined its normal tastes and inclinations, and we've got it addicted to all kinds of garbage. And so a lot of it, what it says now, is give me more of my drug, more of my garbage, to keep the addiction going, just like a heroin addict would do. And as the parent, just like you were with the mind, you have to differentiate once you start listening to what it's saying as an addict that wants more drug, to what it's saying as a kid, please help me and give me what I actually need. And as the parent, you're designed as well as the body is. You have everything you need to get your discernment back and be able to tell the difference. And so if you have a drug-addicted child, which is the body, now I'm telling you some levels that aren't physical, but they impact the physical. They don't mean that you don't do the right food and all that stuff. This is just what's behind it, that if you grasp it, it's going to start making it easier. So if you have a drug-addicted child, it requires deep love, acceptance, and full responsibility as the parent. You were out to lunch and your attention wandered all over the place. You were being sloppy when you should have been taking care of the kid, and it's not the kid's fault. So you learn the laws of nature. You set up this relationship with the kid that's conscious and appreciative, and then you learn about food and drink and air and sunlight and grounding and sleep and exercise and redirecting the programs of the mental and emotional programming. And then you use what you learn to help the child. But it's in that atmosphere of love, not doing something to your body as if it's a thing. And there's going to be withdrawal pains and cravings when you change an addiction and you stop feeding it. But once you learn the perspective that we're talking about, you know those are not yours, and you just observe, and you just support the child going through them because they're temporary. And the detoxification that the autistic kids need, and the people with degenerative diseases need, and the mentally ill people need, because it's always physical and mental and emotional all tied together. Fasting in various forms is the built-in detoxification method that the body was designed for. And if it's really, really toxic, like most of us are now, much worse than we were thousands of years ago, you can't just go on a long water fast. A lot of people would get in real trouble with that. They might die. So a lot of health teachers have devised modified fasting systems like juice fasts that they do for a while. People have done those safely for months if you know how to do them. And even if you're not in a serious situation with really immediate health problems, you can gradually lighten your diet, make it more 100% organic, which is kind of the minimum now, because the poison they're putting on the food is not worth eating, to put it mildly. And more toward the raw side, get away from meat, because meat in any form is not what the human body is designed for. We're not carnivores. We're not psychologically adapted for that. And you can't have empathy and be a carnivore, because to have the meat healthy for you, you have to rip the animal apart as it's dying and screaming and just start eating it. That's what carnivores like to do, and it's normal for them. It's not bad, but it's not what humans are designed for, and their gut's not designed for it. It messes up what they call the microbiome, and you can't balance it if it's got rotting flesh in it, and makes problems. So if you get away from that and away from processed food, which is also deadly and has no life force, and you start eating whole food and find a good source of not denatured organic raw milk is really valuable. If you know how to use that, we can talk about it too. Then you put all these tools together with sunlight and the other things you need, and I think that we can develop enough natural immunity and resistance to all of the things that our global rulers are doing to us, that it buys us some time before they make this planet unlivable, which they do plan to do. It's not a mistake. They're moving that way. But I think if we buy ourselves time by maximizing our normal energy level and health now, then we can start doing our real work, which is to learn how to receive and transmit this energy that can transform the planet on a level that the negative rulers cannot match. And we have a lot of friends and allies that we don't know about right now. Most of your friends you've forgotten, and they're not in physical form, but they haven't forgotten you, and they're available to help, not to intrude on your free will, but if they're invited, they can do things that are quite enjoyable to help you with challenges in life. And it's just fun to become aware of the bigger picture of life and realize the idea of being alone is humorous. I mean, it's impossible, because there's conscious life absolutely everywhere, all around us, all the time. And The negative forms of it are only attracted where there's low energy and negative energy patterns. So you don't need to have that around you. In the energy world, it's like attracts like. So if you raise your own vibratory level by becoming more conscious, becoming aware of the programs in thought and emotion and all the stuff we've been talking about, and you direct the programs to be wishing well for everybody, no malice for anyone. That's a basic rule of healing. You can defend yourself. You have to defend yourself and others, and even if you had to use lethal force to defend your home or something like that, that's fine, but you can't have malice for anybody. Because even the ones that are acting the worst are victims, and they're totally fooled by their own programming. So you wish them healing. And if we do that, we really have the potential power to turn it around. And you always start by healing yourself, not by correcting other people. Even though they may really be doing a lot of things wrong, what you're giving to them is the level of consciousness that you have. And it doesn't matter if you're saying the best things in the world, telling them all these things that are true. What's transmitting like a carrier wave on the words is what you have become. So we can come across a person who is really doing some amazing work in themselves, and they say hello, and you just feel happy all day. And another person that says hello and walks away, and you feel like you just got covered with sewage, and it's the energy in the words. And so if you want to be able to have a big impact in a positive way, you just forget changing other people in the beginning and 100% of the energy on changing ourselves. And that's the fastest way to have the effect that we want to on the other people. And you practice this in mundane situations that come up. And it doesn't matter how ordinary it seems. It has secret, massive implications. So if you're talking with somebody in your family, which we often don't appreciate, and that needs to be changed. Or if you're talking to somebody that just stops you in the grocery store or something like that, realize those are these amazing teachers. Those are the essence of love. That being is disguised as that person in a situation that's exactly tailored to what you need at that second. So once you really understand that, then instead of your automatic response being, rats, I mean, it's a family show. I hope I can say rats, but I wanted to do this other thing. These people are holding me up. They're ruining my schedule for the morning. You don't have this kind of response. In yourself, you say, thank you. I didn't realize this is what I need to be doing in this moment. And if you start responding that way with gratitude and love, wishing that person well, not trying to figure out all the answers for their problems, but just wishing that the spirit inside them, which is the same one as inside you, just start waking up and fixing everything in their life for the better, then amazing things start happening. I mean, it feels like magic, because these programs that we've been running without thinking about it, they're so powerful that what we think has been coming up because of outside circumstances and people has been in response to the program that we've been running. So that's why I think, each one of us, you essentially, are really this tremendous hope for the world, because the people involved in this, what looks like a huge hierarchy of bad guys, if you want a tiny glimpse into a little bit of that, look at the banker confession video I think Doug has put up on our website. Now it's from a Dutch banker that was brought into the big money circles and getting higher and higher in the banking world in Netherlands, where he was in that business, and got invited into the power levels, realizing up to about the top 8,000 people that are controlling the business of the whole planet. And he got stopped because the next step was to help them participate in child sacrifice. There are all these satanic services and worships that they're doing in order to make sure that you're blackmailable and controllable before they let you know anymore. And he broke down and he couldn't do it. But in the videotape, which I thought was very authentic, he is saying what happened. These guys are a formidable array of adversaries right now, but they're all victims. And they're all giving into the negative side of the programming. And they are powerful, but they can only get up to a certain point because, speaking of natural laws, there's a place you can't pass if you still have malice for anybody. And they have malice for everybody. They hate life and everything good in the world. And as long as they hold on to that, they're just going to be torturing themselves, and it's not going to work. I mean, they can make a big mess, unfortunately, which is what's happening now. But we have potentially vastly more power for healing than they do for destruction. And it's just that we can't use it if we're sloppy with our programming and we're not directing our thoughts and emotions. And if we, not by force, but by relaxing and tuning into what we want to be transmitting, if we go that way, we can surpass them by an almost infinite distance. And at that point, I think we'll have the power to help change their minds and change the whole situation and heal the world, basically, which is one of my ulterior motives here, to encourage you to do that by working on yourself, not by going out and forcing other people to change. So, anyway, yeah, so at the top levels, these guys want to destroy everything, and I think they don't realize it unless they're really near the top. And those guys know it's a ceremonial sacrifice. And it's the old idea that you kill something in order to become virtuous or succeed at your own spiritual goal, right? You kill somebody innocent or an animal or whatever. And it's an old idea. And there's all kinds of old stories about animals being killed so that people would become virtuous and holy. And these guys are doing the same thing in their own way, except instead of an animal or a single person, they're using the whole biosphere. And I'm pretty sure that's what's happening. So from the animal's point of view, which we're in right now, if we realize it, I think you understand why this sacrifice idea is not a really good plan. And you never really fully understand it until you're the animal. But now we are. And so I would vote against it. And the way to end that ceremony would be heal yourself, become conscious, become self-aware. And then you'll be shown what you can do, because these forces of life are wanting to use you in ways that you're going to like, and it's very enjoyable. And it's going to help everybody. It's a win-win-win situation. But all you have to do is change your intent and be open to learning about that, and then it starts to happen. And we have potential for this incredible healing power, even if we say nothing. And that's why the rulers want to keep us unconscious at any cost, because at the very top, they understand that's their weakness. If we ever become self-aware, the whole game is over. So they want us unconscious long enough to finish their plan. That's the reason, the ultimate reason behind vaccines, GMOs, chemical agriculture, which was never necessary scientifically, fake medicine. I don't mean emergency medicine where they save you from car crashes. I mean the health stuff where it says, oh, just take poisoned chemicals called medicine and you'll be fine. It's totally fake. It's killing 1 million people a year in America. The fake educational system, the geoengineering, all this stuff is ultimately to keep us unconscious and destroy the biosphere. It's really not that complex. There's complex details, but that's what it's for. But the energy of the life force that started all this and has creates us and is really who we are, that is so much more powerful. And it can't be kept unconscious forever. So, one analogy that I kind of like is if you're standing outside in the garden and you've got a hose with magical healing water, right, that flows through your water system. and you're gripping it so hard that you're trying to make the water come through, and you don't realize the water knows how to come through that hose. If you just stop gripping it so tight, it would do it. This is exactly what's happening. So rather than learn how to make water, what all the chemical formulas are to make it flow and all this kind of junk that, misguided science thinks about, all you have to do is let go. And then pay attention so that you know where to turn the water and what plants to put it on and stuff like that. Just release the grip and allow the water, and it comes through, and that water is not regular water. It's really amazing. And even if we're too late, and the bad guys destroy the world before we can get this done, we're going to be okay, because we're not what we think we are. The creation is not a pile of inert atoms that happen to line up a certain way. Yeah, dust might go back to dust on a certain level, but you're not dust. And consciousness is not dust. You're not the body. And it's not a matter of believing somebody. That's irrelevant. I'm inviting everybody to disagree, but find out. And you're capable of finding out by direct experience. So even though we're going to be okay if the world blows up tonight or tomorrow, I'd prefer that it doesn't, because my preference is that we avoid the trauma. And the kids that are being born right now, and the ones that are going to be born, and the little kids running around, and the older kids, and even the adults who are just kids in big bodies, I want to have us help them have a better world to live in, because it's just the natural thing. They're us in another form. And when you start even getting a tiny bit of consciousness, you just naturally want everybody else to be okay. It's not because you want something back. And that just doesn't even come up. You just automatically want people to be okay. This is the same reason you can't hurt animals. Whether it's a steak dinner or a ritual sacrifice, you can't do it any more than you could torture and kill your pet dog. It would never come up. So everything follows consciousness. And if you start to get that, everything changes. So the bottom line is you heal yourself, and that gives you the power to heal the world, just like Michael Jackson's songs talked about, and a lot of other people. And so, I guess it's a redundant message in a way. I've said the same thing other times before. I hope I didn't bore you too much, but I don't know what else to say that is important, that is a tool that you can use no matter what's going on with your physical body, what kind of health issues you've got. You can use this and learn it step by step. And even if no one knows what you're doing, it's fine, because that's just a distraction anyway. What you're doing inside is just known to you and to spirit. So I would recommend find out the incredible tools that you're carrying that are normal that we've forgotten. So I just wanted to share that with you. So if anybody wants to say anything, and I notice almost everybody that's listening to us, we're getting new listeners, but almost all of them listen to the archives and things like that. So, excuse me, if you want to talk and you want to share anything from your own life, or tell me that I'm completely out to lunch and it's all ridiculous, that's fine. I invite you to do that. I don't mind at all, because as I said, it's totally not about me. If you take my invitation to explore and you find out I'm wrong, great. Just don't just find out I'm wrong, find out what's right and connect to it, live it, use it, because you're really needed in the world right now. There's a big drama playing out, and you're on the stage and in the audience both at the same time. It's amazing, way beyond science fiction. And anything that you can imagine and much more is possible and is real on some level. So I'm going to take a couple of calls, and anybody else that wants to still call, you've got a little while, and then if we finish early, that's great. I'll go do some other work. But the number, if you want it, if you're listening live, is 657-383-1002. And in the meantime, let's talk to Dee in California, see what's happening with her. Hi, Dee. How are you doing?
Hi, Richard. I'm good.
Good.
I had something funny happen this week.
Yeah.
Well, I had these phone calls at 7 o'clock in the morning every morning, and it was a credit card company, wanting to whatever, and I don't have, that kind of interest in that, and so I just kept hanging up the phone every day, and it just kept going on and on. That was not this week, but last week, and it just went on, and finally I got tired of it, so I decided to actually talk to them and see if I could get them to take me off their call list.
Yeah.
So the gal that I talked to, I explained to her nicely that it was waking me up every morning and that I'd rather be off of their call list. And she just goes, "Oh, I love you." And I'm like, "Well, I love you too." And then she goes,
"That's not the typical response from a credit card person."
It was so unique. And then she goes, "Are you breaking up with me?" And I go, "Yeah, I guess I am." And she goes, "Oh, okay, hold on, I'll take you off the list."
Oh, that's great. So it worked out perfect.
It was so cool. It just goes to show that, once I started changing, everything around me started changing.
I know, that's so incredible. I mean, that's happened to me too, is that if you find out where the thoughts and feelings of conflict are in you and forget about finding them in everybody else, you get rid of them in yourself and they don't come to you much anymore.
No, it was exciting because in the past it would have been just an irritating thing, but it was good all the way around. It felt good. I didn't have any bad feelings. She didn't have any bad feelings. It was really cool.
That's a great experience.
Yeah, I was like so blown away. I thought, oh my goodness, she's doing Ho'oponopono on me.
Yeah, exactly. It's really fun to be the object of that, actually.
It is. But I also have a question about ants, because this is the time of year I put the ant tarot out. It's just borax, basically, but I'm trying to discourage the ants from coming in the house, because, one way or another, I'm going to have to end up killing them if they do, because I can't just live co-mingling with them, and so I feel bad when I put it out for them, but it really works, and they don't come in. So I'm not sure if, I know what you said about eating your dog. You don't want to do that, but what about ants? How am I going to not feel bad?
Definitely start by not eating your dog. I think that would be good.
Okay.
But with the ants, it's a really interesting question, because just because things are small doesn't mean they're unconscious. Compared to much bigger things, we're really small, less than ants in a way. And so I don't see anything wrong with self-defense of your home, with borax or whatever, but ultimately, I have heard people tell the story, and I haven't experienced this myself, that with ants or animals or gophers in the garden or other things like that, they did get to a certain point in self-awareness where they could talk directly to those beings, and they cooperated. Stop coming in the house, stop coming in the garden, etc. And I do think it's possible to get to that point. I just haven't done it yet myself.
Okay. Well, I tried it with that rooster, and that never did work. I don't know what was wrong with him or me, but I finally this week took him to a store that relocates them.
Oh, good. Okay.
So I'm praying
if you're not going to get along, that's a good idea.
I
if you're defending your space too, it's fine.
Maybe he didn't like it here, so maybe he'll get a better home that he'll be happier at.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that was perfect. And the only other thing I know to do with ants is, they have a pretty strong sense of detection. I don't know if it's smell or what, but you can't leave even a single particle of anything edible around on counters where they come and stuff like that, because they can tell it's there. And if you keep those absolutely immaculate, then there's less chance of ants and things coming in. But other than that, if they still come in, I would, feel fine defending your space. I don't think
okay, well, I felt bad, but then I waited like a week, and I finally saw them coming, and I decided I better do it.
Yeah, and eventually they stop usually when you do that.
Yeah. So, I did that, and I also had a episode, I think it was a few weeks ago, where all of a sudden I had a big realization that I didn't need to be afraid of anything. I mean, really, 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 all the way to it doesn't matter what happens to me kind of a thing.
Yeah.
So once I got to that point, everything's just been flooding in. All this information of how to do things right is just coming to me out of the blue. It's amazing.
Yeah. I think the only way people will understand what you're talking about is by doing it. We've been programmed to think that fear is so useful. There's even books that say fear is really useful. That if you're not afraid, something's going to surprise you and hurt you. And it was never true. In fact, it's been doing so much damage. All of the anger and frustration and resentment and all these other, things that make a big mess of the emotional state are mostly all coming from fear, and it was always completely voluntary. It was never required.
Well, it's kind of a whole new thing, and I'm seeing what you're saying, that it was voluntary. I just didn't realize it until then.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
I've been listening to what you've been saying, and that has sunk into my subconscious enough, or my conscious, I don't know which one, but enough to where it's starting to actually seep through my veins to where I'm getting it. But it takes time, for that.
Yeah, it really does take time, and it's just like plant growing or a flower blooming or something. You can't just force it to do it all at once. Overall it's pretty fast, but it seems slow when you're in the middle of it. And it's like, we are in a really unstable environment, and you never know what's going to happen here. We're in a physical body that could be cut to pieces, and horrible things could be done to us, but none of that means that you have to have fear.
Right.
If it happens, it happens. I'd rather have things be pleasant, is my preference. But even if they're not, they don't get fixed by having fear.
Right. Well, what helped also is I have a friend who is a really good example that I can actually see it working in, and so that kind of helped a lot.
That's fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah, because a lot of bad things have been happening to this person, but they don't react the normal way. They just accept it and move on, and that's been a huge, huge, help for me to see somebody actually do it,
Yeah, that helped me too, except that it took me, in my case, years of seeing this person demonstrate it before I started to get it. So, and it doesn't have to take that long. It sounds like you're going a lot faster.
Yeah. Well, I had the hardest time kicking myself, too, when I would say the wrong things and do something wrong, like when I'm first starting to practice it. Yeah. But now what I do is I just look at it because I like to ride horses. And so usually if you fall off a horse, they always say you get right back on and ride it, so you don't get the fear.
That's right. That's right.
So I've been doing that with when I mess up. I just immediately let it go and don't kick myself, and I forgive myself immediately, and then that means I'm getting back on, and I'm just gonna keep going forward and riding it. Right.
Yeah, that leaves you with the impression of success, and so it becomes a new habit. It's a lot better.
And it's been working.
Yeah, it works great. It's all just fun stuff if you really realize it. I mean, we're programmed to think that because it's so serious and horrible what's happening in the world and all these difficulties that we have to feel really intense and stressed and unhappy and unpleasant stuff all the time. None of that was ever true, and it never helped.
Right. It just made us feel worse instead of better.
Right. Yeah, exactly. It kept the whole cycle going. So we're just here to start a different cycle entirely.
That's cool.
Anybody can do it. Any of us can do it. We've got massive power.
It's amazing. I mean, I had no idea till, I started listening to this show that I had that kind of power. So
it's not even limited because it doesn't come from you.
No, it's not. I just let it flow through, like what you were talking about, and I'm getting better at it. But I feel like a gawky fifth grader. Like when I was in fifth grade, everybody got to learn a musical instrument, and when you first hear the fifth graders play their instruments in front of the parents, oh my gosh, it sounds like, oh wow, everybody's
and
off key, and So I mean, it's like learning how to.
All the great players sounded like that in the beginning.
Okay, great players. I'll remember that because it's like learning to walk. I feel like a gawky fifth grader or a baby learning to walk or something. But and it's gonna like a baby. If they fall down, they don't just never try to walk again. They have to get up and try to walk.
It's just totally normal, And that's all the great track stars and athletes and everything were falling down when they tried to walk too.
And then the other thing that happened this week that has been a revelation is when I would talk to somebody that ended up, after I left the conversation, I had this really weird feeling like there was a lot of tension in the communication. And I used to just look at that like, that's just they must be having a bad day, and it's not my job to figure out what's wrong with them. And now I'm starting to say to myself, I wonder what it is in me that struck a disharmony chord instead of something working, smoothly.
Yeah, that's a big step. They become your feedback device.
Yeah, so I'm looking at it like it is my job. I can't just blow it off and say, oh, well, that's not my job. I'm going to look at it like, oh, well, I guess I can learn something because otherwise that wouldn't have happened.
Right. I mean, you don't have to correct them. No. But if you figure out what to change inside yourself and then watch how it affects them, that's going to teach you a lot. It's a great opportunity.
Yeah, like, when I first started talking to you, I was telling you how my neighbors were really irritating me because they were spraying Roundup everywhere.
Yeah, right.
Well, it's been like over a year since then, and now I've been doing the Ho'oponopono and loving all my neighbors. Now I love all my neighbors, and they're all changing. They're all starting to communicate more. They're all starting to not spray any Roundup. It's just been amazing.
That's great. I mean, you're demonstrating basically how to heal the whole world.
And it's
with
spreading.
Your neighbors. Yeah.
Yes, the neighborhood's growing because I just got a phone call yesterday that my goats went up the hill, over the hill. They went AWOL over the hill with the babies into these duplexes. So now I'm looking at that as a big opportunity. Now I get to walk up and introduce myself to all those neighbors up at the top of the other side of the hill.
Yeah. Yeah.
And explain to them that if they find my goats to call me, and I'll give them my number and make friends with them.
Exactly. And if you realize that this whole thing is a hologram, it's not solid, then the people who are brought into that part of the picture, meaning the residents of those duplexes, they're not going to be the same people that they would have been if you were carrying different energy.
Wow.
You're going to be affecting who moves in.
Oh my goodness.
Retroactively. Wow. So if you change your energy, then the person that you run into who moved in a long time ago will be completely different than who you would have run into otherwise.
Oh my goodness. That's so
all
cool.
Change. Yeah.
So time doesn't apply because it just backs up and fixes.
It's just a movie.
Neat.
We're part of the movie that they're running, and they're part of our movie, and it's all intricately interwoven. But every single person has complete power over it, even though that seems paradoxical. It's true. It's just that almost nobody's using it.
Well, that kind of reminds me of a question I had for you, which was, I was going to ask you whether you thought that because we thought of something had happened, or whether it was deja vu where then we thought afterward, like, I can't explain it very well, but it's a timing thing. But I kind of ended up asking my own questions and getting my own answers, and what I think it is both, forward and backward.
Yeah. Yeah, remember, if it's all coming out of consciousness, it's way beyond what the intellect can grasp. Because there's only so many levels of complexity that your mind can deal with. And the reality is pretty much infinite beyond that. So it's all changeable. And if you change the hidden power point for healing the whole situation that we're never supposed to even imagine is internal. So all of it is subject to what you do inside.
Wow. Well, I'm thinking of things like surprise packages now, because I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm looking at it like, okay, it's going to be exciting. It's going to be like what you were talking about, how you make your mind your ally and you give it something exciting to do. So yes. Every time something comes up, I'm just going to look at it like when we were kids, my mom used to take us to this little trinket store to keep us occupied while she was shopping, and they had little things we could afford with our allowance, and some of it was like these little surprises inside, like a string ball that was all wrapped up in all these different wrappings, and we would unwrap it and unwrap it, and finally we'd get to the prize in the middle. So I'm just going to look at everything like one of those little string balls and try to find a prize in the middle of them.
Exactly. No preconception of what the prize should be. Because if we have a preconception, we might influence it, but it's way better if we let it be decided by itself.
Okay, I'll remember that.
It's going to be better than what we would have chosen.
Oh, right. Better. I like that. So, also what happened, this week has been jam-packed. I mean, it's just been jam-packed with really neat things happening, and one of them was, I think about 4 days ago or so, I was thinking about my little sister, because I was making a list of people to well-wish for. So I made a list, and she was on the list for some reason. She popped into my head. And then there was another lady that I had used to be doing conference calls with, and I hadn't lately, and she popped into my head. That very night, both of those people called me.
Yeah. How neat.
Yeah.
That kind of thing happens more and more.
So it was very interesting.
Yeah, it's just paying attention, really.
Okay, well, I didn't know if that was a premonition, like that they were going to call me, or if I caused them to call me. But either way, it could be both. I mean, I don't know. Yeah,
it could be both. I mean, the power that is running through you is the same one that creates everything.
Okay.
So the more you let it go, then you just get in harmony with that.
Yeah.
It's very hard to put in words. I mean, it's way beyond language. We're trying to get a hold of something that you experience, So the descriptions are never really totally accurate. But there's something amazing going on way beyond anything that the intellect can grasp, and it's our normal state. So if we even just start going in the direction one step, it's like it seems so miraculous compared to regular life that everything's different.
It is different. It's neat though. Like now that I'm making this list of people that I want to pray for or well wish for, it's just a growing bigger and bigger and bigger list. So I don't know how many of them I'll get to every day, but it's huge now. And I didn't even know I knew that many people, but I'm meeting new people constantly.
Exactly.
So I'm looking at it like I'm gathering chicks under my wings, and they're my little pet projects, and I'm just gonna keep wishing them well and encouraging them through just sending them like good thoughts and good
you
heart.
You can see why
love.
We didn't feel good before, because we had a kid that we weren't even taking care of, which is the mind, and it was really upset that it wasn't ever recognized as good or important or worthy to be appreciated. And so it was going around destroying the house every day, and we were living in that and blaming it on everybody else. And now we find out, as you're demonstrating, that, well, all these other people have all actually been involved in our life as well, and we've been ignoring them, and all of these kind of haphazard energy patterns have been flowing back and forth, and naturally things feel uncomfortable because all that stuff is subconscious, and everybody tries to avoid becoming aware of it at all costs, which is why drugs are popular, whether it's alcohol or whatever, or just getting lost in TV programs and forgetting the outside world. But if you start to become aware of all those energy connections and allowing them to be healed, the experience is like some different dimension. I mean, it's completely different.
Okay, yeah, allowing connections is what you just said, right? So we don't have to...
Becoming aware of them. Yeah.
Aware. Okay.
They're already there.
I didn't even know about half of these neighbors. I mean, there's more neighbors I'm meeting all over the place, just one after another. It's growing so fast, I can't even keep up with it.
Yeah, exactly. And each one of them is like a whole universe in themselves, because they've got the same spirit inside that is your essence, is in them. So you're meeting yourself in all these other forms. And that's where that saying came from, loving your neighbor as yourself. Well, that's all make-believe until you find out your neighbor is yourself.
That part has been really hard for me to grasp, that they are me. That part has really been hard for me to grasp. But then the other night, I don't know, I just wanted to relax and watch a movie, and I have like old VHS movies, and I have one called Phenomenon. And in that movie, John Travolta's saying, he's trying to explain what's going on with him to his friends, and so he's explaining to them that he figured out that everybody's connected like an aspen grove, where there's all these trees growing, but all their roots are connected, and it's huge. It covers miles and miles and miles.
Yes.
So I'm trying to look at it that way to try to understand that better.
It doesn't mean the personalities are the same. It means what is the life force inside that is the real self is the same.
Okay.
And it just shows itself as all these... They've all got their own mind and their personality and their habits and their history and relations and all this stuff that's different. But who they are under all that programming is identical.
Okay. You're talking about like the energy source?
Yeah, the consciousness. The source of the energy is the consciousness, even though the words are not adequate. So if you relate to them as that and you look right through and see that in them, they are going to feel like they've known you forever.
Okay, well, what I've been doing, I don't know, it just popped into my mind out of nowhere, is I was thinking about, how you did that one show talking to the Indian people from India, and you were talking...
Yeah.
Well, what impression I got from that was that it would be good to be, and you talk a lot about honoring people and respecting people, which I hadn't really given much thought to before, so I decided to do an experiment, and what came to me from when you did that show was that it might be fun to try to bow to people in my mind, so that way I'll remember to honor them.
They might haul you away to some psychiatric institution if you do it physically, but if you do it in your mind, I think it's a good idea. Right.
So I started doing that to every stranger that I would meet. I would just pretend that I was bowing to them, and that would bring me to a humbler position, and I was more able to really get more in tune with each person. Yeah,
because they're all disguised like master teachers and essentially the same spirit. So they're worth respecting that way. And if you do it, it kind of helps them start to become aware that there's something else in them, and that their awareness starts to change.
Yeah, that's what happened. It opened up communication way better than it was before.
Exactly. Yeah, but we're so used to blaming everything on everybody else, and it was always us.
Yeah, it doesn't even have to be communication where I talk to them. It's just communication where it's subconscious.
Yeah, you feel it. Basically, what you're doing is making harmony.
Okay. Well, you said to focus more when you're talking to people. So when I do that bowing thing, it helps me to focus on them instead of what I wanted to do the next minute. You know, I don't get
exactly like that person is the most important thing happening at the time. And if you say every word with attention, the effect is entirely different than what we're used to.
And it takes practice. I noticed.
Yeah, fortunately we have that happening.
Yeah. I have to, remind myself because I do forget to do it. It's not automatic yet, but I'm thinking it's going to get automatic.
It will. We were able to make all these ridiculous habits the rest of our life. It's actually easier to make positive ones because they don't have all the stress in them.
Yeah, it seems easier.
Yeah.
So when I do my well-wishing or my meditation or whatever you want to call it, praying, I'm just thinking of like all those people, like I'm going back to wish or each one love, even if it's just for a second, and I look at it like going out to water my garden. So they're just like part of my garden, and I'm watering them by thinking of them.
Exactly. You're some kind of this super benevolent being or spirit in a human body, but you only look like you're limited to the human body. You're actually unlimited in size, in effect.
Okay.
And when you spread that kind of harmony, it affects everything, because just think of the scientist working on some new horrible GMO plant. If your harmony starts to reach people like that, they start to become aware of what they're doing, and they can't do it anymore. It's just like that banker who couldn't do the child sacrifice, right? So he had to quit what he was doing. He couldn't do it because he had a little bit of awareness left, a little bit of conscience and self-awareness. And that's what you're giving people when you're doing what you're describing. And as you get more used to it, and more out of the way and more relaxed and more focused, and that more of it can come through the hose because you're not grabbing it so tight, then it starts to affect a wider circle of people, and it has a deep shaking up effect, so that they start having a awareness of conscience, and that's going to change everything they're doing in their life, and it's just a chain reaction. That's what the global rulers at the top are worried about might happen.
Yeah, it seems like everybody's...
It's good for them if it does happen, actually.
Well, because of the brainwashing, everybody's in these little negative brain loops, and everybody's in their own little island and thinking their negative brain loop messages over and over.
Yeah, and the ones at the top of the negative structure are just doing it in a counterpart to what you're talking about. They're doing it with great attention, total focus, persistence, and putting all of the negative energy into everything that they do. And so it does a lot of damage. But the thing is that that's not as powerful as light energy. So when you're putting out the harmony resonance, it's like, if you have two strings on an instrument and one's vibrating, the other one tries to vibrate at the same pitch. And the frequency of the harmony energy that you're putting out is way stronger than any kind of satanic or negative or dark energy. So what happens is, as you get better at that, and other people do too, and it starts spreading, then the people who are so focused on the destruction will spontaneously start realizing, well, they're just hurting themselves, and they won't be able to keep going. So,
and they could break out of that loop.
They have to, because they're the same being as we are.
Oh.
It's just a question of when.
So it's almost like giving them an invisible hand up or out of their...
That's what they need it. That's us in the worst position, being the completely devoted servants of darkness. People have always been playing that role, but they have to eventually get out of it because it's not leading anywhere real. What they're made out of is still permanent, and it has to go back to its source.
Yeah, I want to take off the costume and the mask and all that stuff and just be who I'm supposed to let it go. But, people are... That's
what you're doing.
Yeah, but I can see that their intents get misconstrued and because of their programming, and mine too. I'm not saying I'm perfect yet, but I'm seeing hope that I never saw. And so I decided that I would give them hope by giving them the benefit of the doubt. So if I misconstrue their intent and think, I get my suspicions up and think, they're just thinking bad thoughts of me or whatever, I'm just going to drop that and try to do the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah, who cares? I mean, even if they hate you, how does that affect anything? It doesn't even matter.
Right.
Because what you're giving them is more powerful than any hate-related energy anyway, and you don't want to get distracted with that. Plus, it's really hard to have a fight with just one person. You usually have to have two opponents, right? So if you're sending them healing energy and they're hating you, they don't have anywhere to hook onto.
Okay.
It works better for them if you get into their energy. So if you just decline to do that and keep more focused on yours and say, thank you for showing me how important it is to stay completely in this, then even they become an ally without wanting to be.
Cool. Like this is the first week that I really caught on to when my brain tried to trick me, or my mind tried to trick me, my program, my software, not my brain hardware, but my programming software. I really picked up on it this week, what it was trying to do. And so instead of, like what you said to do was just to, like, sit down on its level, look at it eye to eye like it's a little 2-year-old and explain to it why I'm not going to fall into, being suspicious or this or that. And I just sort of sat down and talked to it, and I said, this is not, productive. I'm not going to fall into that today, so let's just move on and find something better to do. And we did, and that was the first time was this week that actually really, I caught it right away, and it worked right away.
Wow, how wonderful. Yeah. And you can just, use a lot of praise and say, wow, that was impressive. You got me to think that I was having all these bad thoughts and that it was me. That was very skillful. You're an incredible, being, and you're a great kid. Why don't we use that talent for this thing that is really important? I think you're ready for it. And the kid's going to get all excited about it. I mean, there's no resistance.
Yeah, so it's been an improvement. This whole week has been just totally blowing my socks off. I'm amazed.
Yeah, well, it's great that you're demonstrating for everybody, what you can do. I think that's, just like you said, that helps to see an example of it.
Yeah, well, I was thinking of the movie Ghost, where Patrick Swayze's in the subway, and he's talking to this subway ghost guy, and he's trying to learn how to move a can with his mind or with his intent.
I remember that. Right. That was a neat scene.
So this ghost is all like freaking out, going, "Who sent you? Who sent you?" And I'm like, my mind is trying to trick me like that, going, "What the heck? Where is this coming from?"
Yeah. Once you realize that none of those crazy thoughts and feelings are yours, they're all mind programs, then you can relax. Because it doesn't matter how crazy the program is, it's not yours.
It's not my program.
And as far as the ghost in that movie being all paranoid and everything, just because you finish with your physical body doesn't make you incredibly wise right away. You don't get rid of fear by dying. You have to do that when you get ready to do it. And if you do it while you're still in a physical body, then you have all kinds of fun things you can do after that.
Yeah, I never really thought too much about what the saying "change my mind" really meant, and now I'm figuring out what it means.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what makes that possible is realizing it's not you.
It's not me. It's just what I learned, which was a lot of it just not true.
It's what the kid learned, the mind.
Okay.
That was never you.
Was never me. Okay.
No, you're pure spirit. You've never been anything else.
Okay. Interesting.
You can't fail. You can just get wrapped up in mental programs that will make you, fall for all that stuff and experience it. And it can take you into horrible places like the bankers are doing. But it's not you and it's not them. It's just the programs. So once you know that, then there's no stress.
Okay, just not me at all. I've never been that, right? Not ever?
That's right. You didn't even get the mind until you needed it to deal with some of these more dense levels of existence.
Okay, so now I'm looking at, instead of being careful what I wish for, I'm being careful what I think of.
Yeah, but what programs you allow the mind to think, because that's who's thinking.
Okay, I have to restate that.
Don't lose awareness of the kid.
Okay.
You just want to entice it into really positive programming.
Okay, don't just shut it in the closet, but work with it.
No, because it wants constant appreciation.
Okay, appreciate it.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, because it could really make or break me.
Oh, it's powerful. It's like a 2-year-old kid with nuclear weapons. But it doesn't just have the negative nuclear stuff. It's got the most amazing healing powers for every part of life that you can imagine. That's why some people get healed, just from their mind becoming convinced that that'll happen. It doesn't mean, that you don't need to learn how to physically take care of yourself, but the mind is vastly powerful. And it doesn't have to be just negative. And if you give it the love and appreciation that it wanted, the reason it was tearing up your house was it wanted to be noticed and appreciated. You give it that and then let it do the things that you consider really valuable. It'll get so excited about the recognition that it gets from that, it will just want to help you 24 hours a day.
Wow. That sounds so nice.
This is what the old yogis missed.
Okay. So if I forget that, I'm just allowing my mind to shortchange my whole intent. So I can't forget.
As soon as you think it's you're on hold again.
Okay. Just don't forget that that's not me.
Yeah, you has always been, pure spirit. There's no imperfection there at all. All of these faults and mistakes and what people call sins and all that stuff, they come directly out of programming in the mind. If that gets healed, then it stops.
So is that what you mean when you say you're remembering who you are? You're just reminding yourself that
who you are is way beyond the mind. It's the essence of love. And it doesn't have anything bad in it at all.
So you're just reminding?
You're reminding yourself, you mean?
Yeah, is that what you mean by remembering who I am, is reminding myself?
You stay aware of it. I mean, it's not really a word or something you can remember in language. You can start beginning to get a little closer to in touch with it by feeling that energy coming into you and keeping you alive. and then radiating out. It's not connected to mind. It just comes in by itself, and it's what keeps the mind alive too. And if you just let that come into your life more and more and eventually just live through you, then that's who you are.
So it's not a word, but it's an experience that I get to let happen.
All these belief systems that people kill each other over to argue about who's right and stuff like that, it's not about any of that stuff.
Okay.
It's about connecting to the experience.
Connecting. Okay. I was thinking about you know how in Star Trek where they're beaming to different places? That's like how they get there, is they beam up to the ship or down to a planet, and they're pieces of them are like little fuzzy things of light flowing through the atmosphere, and then sometimes, like due to operator error, they don't make it all the way as a whole thing.
Yeah, they had some unfortunate glitches with that machine, I remember.
Yeah, so I'm thinking, well, maybe, you know, if I'm not in tune with who I am, and I might be more like that, where not all my pieces are coming together. That's
just programs again. Who you are is not. Who you are is untouchable. It can't be. It cannot be damaged.
Okay, can't be damaged.
You can just be caught up in a program that is a mess, but you don't have to be.
Okay. So it's all of us together, that's the I that can't be damaged, right?
Each one of us.
Each one of us.
Yeah.
So, but our whole I, like all of us together, the root system, right now, since some of us are falling prey, doesn't that make us damaged?
I realize that any words I put into are going to sound ridiculous, but I have to try. So the whole root system, like using the analogy of the mat in the tree forest, that real being can't be damaged, but also each individual part of it is the whole thing as well. So you, as D, not the name, but the being internally to you, also can't be damaged. It just gets caught up in this movie. And some movies, are so realistic that you feel like you're getting torn to pieces or, having some experience or other, but it's just a movie. And the person who doesn't know it's a movie is saying, yeah, but what if I get blown into space and all this, all my atoms go to, every part of the universe, and that would be really bad. Like Egon said in Ghostbusters, that would be bad. But the thing that's missing from that understanding is it's a movie.
Okay.
So in the movie, anything can happen in the movie. That can be horrible or wonderful or whatever in between. But it's not changing you. You're watching the movie.
That brings me to another question. What if I'm watching a movie? Is that going to affect consciousness if I'm watching a movie, just like my thoughts?
Depends how you relate to it, you have to observe your own mind and see how you're reacting. If it leaves you with a feeling, to give a really obvious example, that, maybe it's the message of the movie is all old people are terrible or something like that. And if you take that in and start believing it, then that could affect your consciousness. But if you realize it's a movie and you stay in touch with the reality, then it doesn't have to.
Okay, so it's how I react.
It's a microcosm of relating to the bigger movie.
Okay.
It's the same question about events in life. If you have some really terrible interaction with, KKK group that hangs a bunch of people, that could certainly affect your consciousness, right? But if you realize that that's not you, you're not going to join some bad group or hate anybody or anything like that, then it's just the movie. It depends whether you join it. So if you stay as the observer and be in touch with yourself to the deepest level you can, then what you're observing in the outside world doesn't have to change that.
Okay, so I observe, and then the correlations of what comes to me as thoughts and pictures in my head, the outcome is only affected by how I handle it?
You got to keep in mind that that's a program in the mind. It's not you.
Okay.
And then you're free to do what you want. And so you go back to you're spreading the energy that you want to spread.
Go back.
It really doesn't matter what program the mind wants to play. It's not you. So when you see that happening, you go back to your babysitting work and make sure that you've got this really good relationship going on with the kid, the mind. And it can't play these bad tapes if it's busy helping you with good things.
Okay.
If it starts playing them and then you start thinking they're your thoughts and it gets downhill from there, that means you're not doing your work with the kid. You have to keep it occupied.
Okay, versus rewriting the script. I don't even have to rewrite my own script then, right? I just have to let it flow like the surprise package into whatever it's going to be.
Yeah, you stay in touch with the energy. If you're in touch with the right energy, the script follows.
I don't have to make it up.
No, There's almost none of the detail that you have to do.
So my job or my purpose, in order to have my purpose being to spread love, I have to stay in touch with it constantly, right?
Yeah, which is not stress. It's the opposite. It's total relaxation. And, a good mother is supposed to be able to be aware of what her kid's doing while she's doing her own work. So you're constantly, part of your mind is listening to what your kid's saying. And if you hear them start saying really crazy stuff, you know you're not keeping them occupied with inspiration and, positive healing-related stuff. So you have to do that.
Okay. All right. That's interesting. It's like
so you
bumbling
have
through
full-time work.
Yeah. Well,
you can't slack off.
Right, but it is possible for all that to come automatic if we keep practicing and practicing consciously to do it.
It's the most demanding work you can do, and it's completely effortless. So the only demand is where your attention is.
Oh, so that's part of the job, is just attention, where attention is focused.
Yeah, that has to become our new relaxed, normal condition, is paying attention.
Okay.
Instead
so that's
of zoning
my new normal is paying attention.
Yeah, and you know if you're doing it because it's totally relaxed.
Okay, so if I feel stressed, I'll know that I missed the boat somewhere. Yeah,
or you're listening to some programming that your kid's doing and you're not keeping them occupied with what they need to be doing. And fortunately, there's a lot of tools, and if you have some kind of stress, it's always connected to a tension point in your body. So if you scan your body quickly, which you can learn to do easily, and you give it permission to relax, just like you're talking to your mind, you're also talking to your body. And when you let it relax, the stress is gone.
Okay, so that's the opposite of manipulating my mind. I'm just not going to do that.
You don't need to.
All right. Well, the other thing I thought of was, am I creating as I go, or am I experiencing what's already created as I go? And I thought, well, maybe it's both. What do you think? Well,
it depends what you call I, that original force that flows through you that people call God or Spirit or Source or things like that, that's creating all the time. And if you're not obstructing that, then it creates inharmony. And all the situations that you encounter are part of that, and everybody else's activity that you're dealing with, it's all being created, but you're just staying out of the way. Your intent is your only job, and that's for harmony.
Okay. You know how you said if something tries to put a bad picture in my thought, maybe I could replace it with a good thought?
Yeah, well, you talk to your mind, because a bad thought or feeling cannot come into your mind unless your mind plays the wrong program.
Well, should I have like these pictures of different things already on hand so I can just stick them in there really quick, or would that be wrong?
You can experiment with that, or you can ask Spirit, which is where they all come from, to give you the best one it can and see what comes in.
Okay. Because it's almost like, a baby doesn't really know it's growing up, but all of a sudden it gets old enough to figure out that it is a child. So I'm thinking maybe it's like that, since, I don't really know myself that well yet. I mean, I think I know, but I'm wrong, so I'm trying to rediscover who I am, that maybe I just haven't grown up enough to know yet who I am.
These positive things that we want to come in, they're alive. They're not just like two-dimensional pictures of something pleasant. They're living, and they're very strong. So if you just have the intent to let them come in, then they'll happily do that.
Not like a picture, but like the angels that we were talking about last week. Yeah,
exactly. More like that. That's right. They have to be invited. If you invite them and step out of the way, then you'll get images coming into your mind that are better than you could have thought of.
Okay, I will try that this next week. So, am I healing my body, like you were talking about your finger, because I, cut my finger, and it took a long time for that to heal, but it's finally healing. And in the meantime, I decided to apply that to my immune system, because I've been really concerned with my immune system to heal, because my hormones finally started coming back now that my mind loops are stopping. And good. I'm following the good way to eat and do everything with the sunshine and the exercise and the good intent. It's really coming around. So I got my hormones back online, and now I've been applying it to my immune system. And I went through this whole big sick thing for a couple weeks, and it was actually really, really, really scrubbing me clean, because I feel my whole craving thing has totally changed since I went through that. And as I've been going through it, I've been just sort of like a cheerleader team for my immune system to handle it well, and it worked.
Yeah, that's good. And if you just allow it to come back to normal, then the normal immune system is very powerful.
So that's what I've been experiencing, my immune system coming back online. And so now I'm getting really encouraged, and I think I'm going to see if I can't get the arterial plaquing to change just from, encouraging
the body is actually really happy to try to do whatever you ask it. So any of those things are wide open.
It's getting more and more exciting.
Yeah, exactly. It's funny. It's like we said, it's very demanding, but it's completely effortless, and it's all fun.
Yeah, I think it's just demanding because I'm noticing that it's a choice every second, so I have to really think about every second and every thought. So that's. Anyways.
And you find out in the end that's not really difficult. We just thought it was really difficult, but it isn't. It becomes habitual.
Once my mind realizes it doesn't have to play tricks on me, because we're both happier when we don't do that, then everything starts flowing better, and it is getting easier.
Yeah. The old yogis were right that every problem they ever had was coming through the mind. If the mind never played a bad program or fooled them or tempted them to do something bad or whatever it would do, if that didn't happen, they wouldn't have any problems. Their mistake was they tried to do it by fighting with the mind. But because of a different way, you make the kid an offer to become your really valued ally, and it's going to be so excited to help you, it'll just fall over itself to do all these good things. And everything that was created before is going to be gone. And what's really amazing is, like you're finding out, it's not just what you think it is, that the neighbors that you meet are going to be different. I mean, the power of mind is really extensive. It influences everything.
Wow. So is the mind connected like the consciousness to everybody?
Yeah, it's connected to everybody. It's not the source of them. The consciousness is where it all comes from. But the mind is a tool with this vast ability to hook into the minds of anybody else that it wants to. Those so-called supernatural mental abilities are just normal. It's just that we've lost almost all of them.
So like Dr. Spock's mind melting, we can melt minds with like bowing to people and melting my mind with my good intent to their mind.
All kinds of... This is what the clue was with the experience that Thoth had, of the people who wanted to kill him just stopping in their tracks and then becoming very friendly. That was an example of what we're talking about. But it can happen with nobody knowing where it's coming from. If you're sending out healing energy and you're letting your mind help you, and you're just talking to it and said, why don't you show me what you can do? And this is the requirements that I want it to be within, for example, no intrusion on anybody else's stuff that they want, but just making really wonderful things happen for everybody. What would you be able to do with that? Why don't you show me an example and let it try? And it's going to do all kinds of things.
Like even for the people that we don't necessarily think, like we want to pray for our friends, but we want to also start thinking about doing that for people that really don't like us or that are difficult to talk to.
Or, that are doing some major thing like the people flying the chemtrail airplanes. What if they got a change of heart like that banker who couldn't go any further and had to quit? What if they all did? The mind has that kind of power. It's just that we're so disconnected with it. It takes step-by-step practice to get back to it. Okay. And you don't want to do it as the mind yourself, because that is not you. And the ego danger that some spiritual teachers have talked about, acting through the mind being a big ego trap, that's only if you think that's you. If you're coming from the place of spirit or consciousness that's essentially all love, then the ego doesn't get involved.
Okay. Ego is as a mind game.
That's if you identify with the mind, and I would suggest not doing that. That can be destructive.
Well, by identify, you mean accepting what it's saying?
Oh, you start thinking you're really great, because you can do such and such. And that's the old example of pride goes before a fall.
Okay.
The spirit that's enlivening all this is the one that has all the credit and all the ability, and all the love comes from there. We just have the privilege of being conduits for that. Okay. Well, dropping the fear was like a big, huge step to be able to even get to that point. Yeah. And I used to never, I always heard, even most of this last year listening to you, I kept hearing what you were saying, but in the back of my mind, I've always thought that it was more approachable physically than from my mind at all, or from mentally, but I'm starting to really see how much of it is more in my mind, but I just never saw it before. Yeah. Well, people get stuck because they think the mind is them.
Okay, so that's
there's whole belief systems actually built around the idea of what they call the higher mind, and they think that's who they are. But that's not accurate.
So my higher self is what you're saying is the spirit of love. That's it.
Yeah, that's and the words don't cover it. We're just trying to call it something.
Okay.
It uses the mind as a tool, but that tool is alive. That's a little kid.
Okay, a living tool. I'll look at it that way and keep going on.
It's just as alive as a regular child.
Okay.
It has similar emotions.
All right. So emotions and beliefs and thoughts all work together, but beliefs are not that important. Thoughts are just reactions, and then emotions are how you tell what's going on.
I think what you want to get to is direct perception, so you're just observing, you're not analyzing, because analyzing is the job of the mind. And again, that's not us.
Okay, so that was just too much stinking thinking.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be complicated. You just make sure the energy going through stays good, and everything else follows.
Okay, no analyzing. Right? No analyzing?
It can be really confusing because you're always missing 90% of it.
Okay.
But if you're doing your job of taking care of the kid, keeping it occupied with really good things, asking for its help, and making sure that the right intent of energy is flowing through all the time, that's really enough to keep you busy.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to be applying that this week.
Yeah, it'll be fun to see what happens.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Have a great time during the week, and talk to you next time.
Okay. Thanks.
All right. Good night. Bye. Okay, you guys, I don't know if anybody else wants to talk about anything. We've got about 42 minutes potential, but we can also stop now. It seems like most people are just listening on the archives or maybe listening and not wanting to call in, which is fine. And we don't have to go the full 3 hours. If this only reaches 2 people, that's still, what I found out is that's still enough reason for us to do it. But we are reaching quite a few. It's just most of them are listening after the fact. And I just had a couple of other final things to say, which is going to give you like 2 more minutes if you want to call in, 657-383-1002. And the only thing I think I wanted to mention, first of all, might take more than a minute. I wanted to talk about next week's show, which is Dr. Warner. Not next week, sorry, tomorrow. I lose track of time. And he's been, Dr. Warner is an expert on Islam. And Islam is important in world events right now because it's being used in its original form by the world rulers to destroy societies and create chaos and encourage people to kill and rape and invade and stuff in the name of God, which they're happily obliging in doing that. And so I realized before we got Dr. Warner coming on the show that I didn't know enough about Islam, what it really taught, not what somebody interpreted as, but what Muhammad thought and what he taught. And so thanks to Dr. Warner, I did extensive study of all 3 scriptures of Islam, and it's been really educational to understand how that works. And as an example of programming, that more than 1 billion people born into that belief system are dealing with in their own lives in different ways. And it's affecting the future of humanity right now because of some of the violence that's being done in the name of that system. So that's why I wanted Dr. Warner on as a way to educate people. But this week, tomorrow, he's just going to come on and answer questions. Not ones that you call in live for because it's already all decided. But you can always email in questions if you do have any. and I will give them to him. But we've already got the questions for him tomorrow, and it's going to be super interesting for anybody wanting to become educated in not what expert in Islam says or somebody's opinion, even the opinion of an imam or somebody like that, but what Muhammad's opinion was and what he taught as the prophet is going to be covered. And that'll be the basis for those questions, for question and answer. So I think that'll be really great. And it's definitely not in any way to be against anybody who is born into Islam, because that could be any of us, and a lot of those people are super amazing people and very inspirational. So human beings are the same in all countries and systems, but what it is an example of is that if you follow that particular exact belief system as it's written in the scripture, you're going to start supporting mass murder, which I think is not really the best idea to do. So it's not just Islam, it's an example. And the point is, like we were just talking about with Dee, look at your own programming, not somebody else, and say, wow, how am I doing that? How am I a heroin addict or something? Maybe I don't take heroin as a physical drug, but I'm always thinking, really condemning thoughts of some other person. And that's my heroin addiction, and I don't have to have that. So we just went through a long discussion with Dee about how you get off heroin, not necessarily the physical heroin, because a lot of us are not addicted to heroin at the moment, but we have other addictions. And the first step is realizing that they're all connected to programs in the mind, that the mind is playing as a loop. And so if you recognize that it's not you, but it's a program in the mind, and you start dealing with the mind as a conscious entity, then you can get the mind to voluntarily change the program, and it can become very powerfully helpful. So I'm recommending that anybody who's interested in that, try it. And, there are some programs on, because of the terrorism that's going on, that are mad at Muslims. I have no such feeling. I'm using it as an example of programs that every single one of us has in some form. And we have to be able to get past them. And this, whether we can or not, is going to affect whether the world survives. So I think it's kind of important, and it's not important for somebody else. It's important for you. It's important for me. Even if we're only one person doing this, the impact of it energetically and in terms of frequency is so vast that, as we were talking about with Dee, one single person can affect the whole world and more. And so that's where I see, the importance of learning about Islam, is to teach us about the programming that all of us have, and then apply what we've been talking about, of how you can specifically get beyond that. So I'm hoping that that's how we can, present it tomorrow, and I think it's going to be really interesting. Our discussions with Dr. Warner usually go by, they feel like they're 5 minutes long. And I'm hoping that you enjoy it and get something out of it. Let me see if there was anything. We'll take a couple more calls, because we've still got 36 potential minutes, except for the ending music, which is about a minute and a half or so. Everybody's invited to call 657-383-1002, because I'm sure, if you've been following what we're talking about, you're probably dealing with some aspect of exactly the same thing. So anyway, let's take a couple of minutes and talk to Susan in California and see what's happening with her. Hi, Susan. How are you?
Hi, Richard. Good to talk to you again, finally. I'm good.
Yeah, nice to hear your voice.
Oh, glad you can hear me. Okay. First, I've been listening pretty much continually through the few weeks, although I haven't called in quite a while. But I want to thank you and Doug for what you're doing, and thank you for responding to my email that I sent you
sure.
the other day.
My pleasure.
weirded out by what was going on. So I am glad you eased my mind a lot. So thank you.
Oh, good. I'm glad to hear that.
Then, and I just appreciate what you're doing, and I want to thank Dee and John are the ones I mostly hear calling in.
I know. Yeah.
And even though I don't hear other people, I know there are other people that have called in before. I just can't remember their names off the top right now. But I just want to thank Dee and John so much, because when I listen to you and then I listen to their responses or their questions and their input, it's really good. And so
it seems to make it more dimensional.
Yeah, I would. It's almost like sometimes I think, I'd love to call up Dee one day and talk to her, or John, and just find out, things. But so we can't do that, but we can hear that information that they input.
Well, you know what you can do is you can find Dee on the forum a lot, and anytime you want, you can communicate with her right away if you want to.
Well, thank you, and I just want to encourage others too to call in. If they want to, because it's really helpful to hear what's happening. And
I agree.
Both of them have been encouraging to me. I guess, see, I've been a little resistant to some of the things, and yet it makes sense, and it's biblical in my mind, because I'm a Christian, and so it makes sense biblically to me, because Jesus said, as you think in your heart, so are you, and do it to others, and love and all of that. And like I told you in one prior show, my faith is important to me, and I don't want to lose it. However, I told you before, I don't feel like I'm doing it right, because I'm having not a lot of success in some of it. So I'm kind of thinking maybe I'm going to be a bit more open to trying some of the Ho'oponopono techniques, where you're doing it inside yourself towards others.
Because I don't think those aren't a threat to any kind of religious belief that I know of.
Yeah,
it's just opening up some of our forgotten natural abilities.
Yeah. So and because I know that when I go out and I'm interacting with people, if I have a negative attitude, I tend to get negativity. If I have a positive attitude, it comes back that way. And living in fear is where I've been for a while. And it's very paralyzing and depressing, and it's really not good. And I didn't hear some of the program tonight, so I may not have heard some of the answers you had for that. But I've been very fearful of things lately, and things the way they're going. I even said to one of the people I run into occasionally, I said, "So have we been blown up? Have we blown up anybody, or has anybody blown us up yet today?" That's kind of negative. So that was just a few days ago.
The latest bombing news or something like that, right?
Yeah, it was kind of like, okay. So anyway, any input you can give me, and if anybody else is waiting, just go ahead and go to the next one too, because I'd love to hear that input. But I had to call because I haven't called in so long, and I do listen.
I'm glad you do.
Don't ever leave the airwaves, please.
Well, it is nice to hear that somebody's hearing us, and is getting something out of it. But why don't you tell me again what you're actually asking, because I wasn't really following it completely.
Oh, I'm not really sure. Just kind of. Oh, I know one thing. The other day, or the other show, a couple weeks ago, or maybe one of those few recent ones, John was talking about Ho'oponopono also, and he said different things. And he said that you mentioned adding a couple of words. And at that point, I thought, oh, shoot, I don't remember that one, but I know I probably heard it. So I was wondering which one that one was. Or at that time I was kind of thinking it would be cool for new listeners, if there's any new listeners, for you to kind of go over what Ho'oponopono is when people bring it up. So in case people are listening, they don't get lost in, wait a minute, what is that? Or at least where they can find that.
There is a book by Dr. Hugh Lin on it. I don't remember the title of it, but the story was that Dr. Lin was asked to come in and help with a situation. I think it was in Hawaii, where they had a mental hospital, and the psychiatric patients were getting really violent to the point where all the staff was quitting, which is really unusual because usually they just drug all those guys into oblivion so they don't do anything. But somehow the violence was getting out of hand, and they called him to see if he could do anything with it. And he showed up, and he got an office a few miles away from the hospital, and he never met the patients. And he took their files, their detailed files, I guess with pictures and description of what was wrong with each one of them, and he took responsibility. This is all something he did internally. And it wasn't something he memorized. It wasn't like a prayer that he just read while his mind wandered off somewhere else. Because people do that a lot and then wonder why nothing happens. He was actually focusing on each one of these patients individually. And for each one of them in his mind, whether or not he was saying it verbally too, I don't know. I don't think it matters. He was saying 4 things, which is, I'm sorry. In other words, I'm responsible for what is happening with you. I love you. Please forgive me, and thank you. And what made that powerful, it didn't matter that he wasn't physically near them, because we talk about the holographic projection being what's going on in the physical world. Space and time are not what they seem. But what mattered and gave it power was that he meant it, and that he absolutely felt it on the emotional level. And he kept repeating it with complete focus. And what happened after a while, and I think it took a few months, is that the patients all started becoming normal, and a lot of them even went home. And that was a big deal, because it doesn't mean that everybody has the ability to, become a doctor at a psychiatric hospital. It means we can do this for our part of the world, or the whole world. We have power in areas that we've forgotten, that are as natural to us as sight and sound and smell and everything, but we forgot all about them. And one of them is this ability to heal by our intention. And the only thing that I changed in that is when it said, I'm sorry, I love you, please forgive me, thank you. On number 3, please forgive me, for me, I just felt better saying, please forgive me and heal, whatever that means for that person or that situation. And so that's how I've been playing with it. And the emotion is what gives the thought power. So if you can focus in a totally relaxed way on where you're sending that healing energy, even if it's to your boss or your wife or husband or your child or somebody at work or somebody in the grocery store or somebody on a street corner or somebody flying a chemtrail airplane, if you focus with total relaxed, one-pointed attention and you go through that in your mind, there's an energy that you get connected to, which is a healing energy, and it doesn't originate in us on the personality level. It originates from where we came from. And we're sharing that with the outside world. So instead of letting our mind run crazy in the usual haphazard, sloppy way, where it's playing all kinds of tapes with thoughts and emotions, and we think that they're ours and get all distressed, we drop that and start playing this one instead. And it has amazing results. Anybody can do it.
That's so good. That is so good. I just thought, I remember thinking that when I was listening to that one with John and you talking about it, thinking, oh, if other people are listening, they might not even know anything about what you said. And I had forgotten about those extra things, that little bit of extra that you added to that. And I thought, yeah, it would be great if you go over that. I went and looked for it too back in prior episodes and listened, and that was really good.
Okay, good. Yeah, all the free archives are there. And anybody that wants to talk about this stuff during the week, that was the idea of the forum, which Doug got set up. And it's really good. There are people using it right now.
Okay, I'll have to look into that. And then also, I need to remember that when I order from Amazon to do it that way. I think it's Smile or something.
Yeah. So instead of using Amazon.com, you use a site called smile.amazon.com. And there's no W's, just smile.amazon.com. And it asks you what nonprofit organization you'd like to support. And if you feel like supporting what we're doing, there's an organization on the IRS approved list that's called Lost Arts Research Institute in Arizona. And if you pick that, then when you spend $10 or whatever you spend on Amazon, 0.5% gets taken out of Amazon's profit, not your money, and given to Lost Arts Research Institute. So that helps.
Can I bring up one other thing?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. Well, I finally got myself over to Optimum Health Institute in California. Good. And it was really amazing. I mean, I almost stayed 3 weeks. I was shy of it by about a day and a half. Well, actually just a day. I missed one day. I kind of left really early in the morning because of some things I had to take care of. One day early, which was a bummer because I missed a good class. They have great classes and great people. Yeah. And it's really interesting how the people that were there when I stayed, and there were, people would come in and then they would go, and so it was different people. But everybody there, or the people that I met, and I met a lot of people there, were they were like meant for me to talk to. It was kind of weird. It was very wonderful. And it's a very spiritual place, very healthy food. They take good care of you. The struggles that I had there were that I'm really thin already. And so the food, it's a cleansing place. So they feed you green foods, mostly green foods, no sugar, very little fruit, and only fruit if you think you can handle it or should have it. They kind of tell you there. Yeah. So it's really, and then you have a juice fast for a couple of days, which I really enjoy the juice. So it was really good, and some days you go through the detox part, and that's a little challenging. Then I felt like I felt amazing after one, the Friday at the end of that first week, I felt amazing. But then I got feeling weak and more detox, and it just came and went. But I sure did have cravings, and when I left, first of all, I only have positive. It's wonderful. I recommend it to whoever wants to go if they want to go. The staff, everybody, beautiful, wonderful thing. When I left, so this is my issue. When I left, and actually the night before I left I was thinking, okay, I want chicken soup. I want butter. I want fat. I want, all this stuff, and chocolate, and all this stuff. Yeah. So all these cravings were coming, and they were all for high calorie, high fat, and I don't I prefer not to have, and of course, I really I want to be raw vegan or at least vegan with a little bit of potatoes or sweet potatoes at the end of the day and vegetables. I don't want to eat meat. I don't like it, and I in no way like preparing it. I can't do it anymore.
Right.
You know.
Right. Okay.
I mean,
good.
Just having like parts in my thing is just like really upsetting. But somehow when you go to a restaurant, it's a lot easier to. Yeah, it doesn't look like an animal there. You know what I mean?
I know it. I know.
But anyway. So I did kind of go off. All I told myself was any or a reaction, an opposite reaction. You know, or I feel like the cleanse was so cleansing that the reaction I had was so opposite. And well, can you speak to that, and how can I avoid that?
Yeah, I'll just give you, my own experience is that I was a vegan and then a raw vegan for a long time. And I've also met a lot of raw vegans, including world-famous raw vegan health teachers and people like that. And my impression is that for the vast majority of people, with maybe some exceptions, the raw vegan long-term regimen is not good. I would not eat meat at this point in my spiritual evolution, no matter what. I would die first. But the reason that we crave it, I would do that because I really don't want to hurt other beings. But the craving for meat and butter and stuff like that, when you come off of a fast and a raw vegan length of time, is not entirely bad. The body wants saturated fat and cholesterol. And the reason it wants those is they're both really good for you. Okay, now Optimum Health Institute would probably want me, tortured and killed for saying that, but it's what I've found. I would not use it during the detox process. Your sound system is echoing or something. I hope you can hear me. The way I got into a real dilemma with that, because I was not going to eat meat, but I started realizing that I was just overwhelmed with cravings for either sugar or cooked starch or fat. And I'd been starting to program myself as a vegan that those were all bad. And I finally had to break out of the programming like we've been talking about and say, look, I don't want to hurt animals at all, but I want fat. And so I found out the way to deal with that was raw milk. And it has to be organic, and it has to be not denatured with hydrogen peroxide or various things that people put in it now to make the government happy. But when I started using that, in the beginning, I couldn't digest it very well because, my bacteria in the gut was all messed up. But very gradually, cleaning the system out really well, that got fixed. And the raw milk has the enzymes in it that are needed to digest it. And that solved the whole thing for me, and I've never eaten cooked food since. And that was many years ago. And as far as the sugar thing goes, I had to give up honey and dried fruit, which I loved, taste-wise, but they just didn't have good effects on my body. But the fresh fruit, when your body's in decent shape, feels like it's really positive if it's ripe and organic. So that's how I solved that stuff. And I was getting emaciated as a raw vegan. I got all my muscle mass back, gained back 30 pounds of muscle. And I feel fine now. I never crave cooked food. So that's your diet one solution.
Is basically is raw vegan with raw vegan with.
You're cutting out. I think you said raw vegan plus raw milk.
Yes. Yes.
Right, and that's true. And in the beginning, especially, you have to isolate the raw milk and not mix it with things, and let your stomach get used to digesting it, and let your gut gradually recolonize with the right bacteria. Meat really messes up the gut bacteria, because you need different bacteria to break down dead flesh than you do everything else. And once that gets cleaned out thoroughly, and you use enemas and colonics and stuff like that in raw food, then eventually the raw milk colonizes the gut, and it's the best probiotic I ever ran into.
Yeah, I do. I actually meat and chicken. Like I was craving that chicken soup. That I.
Yeah. I think
that
it's
was
the
what I was
fat that you're
craving,
craving.
but the problem is, if I eat that, then oh my goodness, my stomach is out of whack, really bad.
Susan, I think what that craving is craving for fat.
I agree totally, and so I'm glad that you will. You're kind of basically saying that's kind of natural after that kind of a cleanse, right?
Absolutely, and I think you need it. You need it for your brain. You need it for your cell walls. You need it for your blood vessels. You need it for everything. That's why the government says that you should never eat it, because it's so good for you.
I don't have a problem. It's really in California looking for raw milk is like, I know in the stores, the health food stores that I go to, they call it raw milk, but it is grade A. So
yeah. So what I would do, and I meant to do this earlier, I was going to call Mark McAfee, who runs Organic Pastures. That's the biggest raw milk dealer in California. That's a big dairy, and ask him if they're achieving grade A by putting hydrogen peroxide in it and killing everything. If so, then you've got to find a small organic, raw milk producer and go get it at the farm. Yeah, and it does exist. And there's a website called realmilk.com. And they have most of those guys listed on that site. And they have a state-by-state registry. So I would go there and check it out. And if you can't find
I'm going to do that because I'm tired of these cravings.
Yeah, exactly. I was too. And it's not your fault. It's biological. And having the fat doesn't hurt you one bit. And I know that because I've experimented thousands of times adding it back, taking it out, combining it with different things. I did have to give up honey and dried fruit, which I didn't want to, but they were not good for me. But the raw milk has been great. The nuts and seeds also are a source of amino acids and some of the fatty acids, and those I found to be essential. Raw and ground up fine so you can digest them.
Okay.
A lot of the raw vegans say not to eat them.
Go ahead.
A lot of the raw vegans say don't eat nuts and seeds because they're too high in protein. I have not found that to be true at all. And that I've also done extensive experiments adding in nuts and seeds and taking them out, and my strength level is completely different with the nuts and seeds in there. So I think they're essential.
Just grind them up really good. That's a good idea.
Yeah, grind them up. You can put some Himalayan salt with them. They taste good. And they have a lot of nutrition in them. Okay. And when you're getting it from that and from the milk, you don't have to have as much cravings for anything.
Thank you, because I was telling myself, well, you're Norwegian, your descent, your ancestry, or whatever you call it nowadays.
Yeah, no, they blame everything on genetics.
So these people lived on cheese and whatever, I don't know, but it wasn't vegetables and fruits. So
yeah,
I feel like
most of what they blame on genetics is not true.
Okay.
Your body your body can switch genes on and off. And so how you manage that really affects everything.
Oh, thank you. I'm really looking forward to tomorrow night. You're going to talk about programming and things, and that's going to be great. So I better let you talk to whoever else or to that subject. I'm going to talk. When I talk to Dr. Warner, he's going to say whatever he wants. But at the very end, I'll make some comments about how that ties into programming. And what I'm hoping is everybody will apply it to themselves, not criticizing other people. But the real PowerPoint for healing this place that we call Earth is inside each person. And I know that sounds unrealistic and everything, but it's not. There's a secret there, and it's very powerful. Wow, thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, you're doing great. I'm glad you got to go to Optimum Health Institute.
Oh,
that's a church.
I want to go back.
It's a church. Yeah, it's a church with a health ministry.
Right. It's wonderful. The people there, everybody, the clients and the staff.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's wonderful. So, all right. Well, let's see what happens next. Try it out this week, and if you want sweets, have some ripe, fresh, organic fruit.
And now is the time because it's finally spring and summer.
I know. And even in the winter, you can take apples and even grate them up, on a grater and make them into some kind of a salad, and you can get a lot of sweet that way. That's live food, and it's really good for you.
Thank you, Richard. That sounds good, too. Thank you.
Yeah, I think you'll enjoy it. So.
I will. Good night.
Okay.
I will. Good night.
Good night. Have a good week.
You too. Bye.
Okay. Hey, John, I apologize for it being so late, but it's nice to hear from you.
No worries. I was basically what calling to say thanks to you and Doug and Dee and Susan for all these great calls, and a lot of the stuff that came to mind during the week with the homework basically came up with these conversations. So it's been great.
Oh, good. Okay. And remember the forum, too, if anything comes up during the week, because I'm sure people would like to hear anything you want to say on that thing.
Yeah, I'll have to remember to do that. But, yeah, it was really great to hear Susan and Dee basically bring up points that I'm sure basically other people come up with, and I know that I've basically had that come to mind. So it was funny because I was just listening and like, yep, there's one of them. Check.
Yeah. Well, that's great. And just in case they miss any, it's good that you call, too.
No, thanks. It's greatly appreciated. And one thing did come up when you were talking to Dee about how the work she's doing could affect who moves in nearby. It made me think, if I was considering moving to a new area, then how do I know? How can I basically set myself up to get in there where I will find my
There's one way to do it that is flawless, and the other ways are all subject to error. And the way to do it that works the best is changing yourself. Mm-hmm. When you do that, you're not going to be able to escape like-minded people. They're going to find you.
Okay.
You can move to a cave and they'll hike there.
Mm-hmm. So I don't really
pretty
much about when I'm going to a new area and looking for a place to live, trying to tune into the neighbors, just basically just find a place that seems right.
You can do that too. You can do that too, because each place has its own frequency, and if you're sensitive enough to feel that, then when you go into a place, you'll be able to see what the energy's like. And I would pay attention to that for sure. Yeah, pay attention.
Okay. Excellent. Yeah, because that definitely came to mind, when you were talking to Dee, so I just wanted to make sure I got that right away.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true, and you can feel that we have so many senses that we don't use and haven't used our whole life. It's amazing. We think they're magic, but they're just normal.
And for people that are listening, doing the raw food diet, some of them will come back just by doing that alone, right?
Yeah, exactly. That starts clearing the mind, and it changes the emotions. In fact, sometimes the cleansing involves difficult old emotions and all kinds of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
They go together.
I've seen it happen. I've had some friends that were on, going on the raw food path, and they've noticed that basically their conditions got worse initially, but I try to remind them that maybe that's clearing out because like emotional messages that come out. They were having like nervous breakdowns.
Once you start seeing it as mind displaying its programs, then it's not so difficult. If you think it's you, it's very confusing.
Mm-hmm. Right, and that was a great part that came up with Dee, so I really appreciate the two of you really, taking the time to really go into detail. That was fantastic.
Yeah, it's helping all of us a lot. So, and Susan said thank you to you too for all the help on the show.
Well, I thank everybody else that made it did, and any attention to the website as well, or just like she said, she brought up the Amazon Smiles program. That's fantastic. All that helps.
Yeah, that was a great idea too.
Yeah, so thank you. So I know there's a time moving out, so I'm going to just wrap up the show and discuss tomorrow night's program, which I'm listening to. So basically, thanks again to everybody, and good night.
Okay.
Good night.
All right. Have a good week, John. Talk to you soon.
Thank you, too.
Okay. See ya. Okay, so we're just about to have the coach turn into a pumpkin here and everything go back to what it was. Remember to go to the site, lostartsradio.com. Doug's report, the Diamond Report, is on there as a playlist. So is Alex Jones News, both of which are great. LostArtsResearchInstitute.org for our nonprofit and the work we want to do with the school. The newsletter sign up is on the radio news site, so is the forum. And let me see, what else? Tomorrow night, Dr. Warner, a few comments from me at the end. We'll talk more about that next Saturday if you want, or during the week on the forum. And all the stuff that the great callers brought up tonight. Play with it this week if you feel like it. And I think you'll be amazed at the things that start happening in your life as a result. And you start getting the idea, wow, could it actually be true that what I'm quietly doing inside my mind and my emotional energy and all that affects the outside world? Because if that's true, then what are the possibilities? And I'm suggesting that's our role, to help actually get the world healed and go beyond just arguing about our points and get the real work done. So see what you can do. Have a good week, and we'll talk to you next time.